another season. Seasons come out, it will be the end. So not every one of these drivers has gone off their road, and we have. It's going to be a blast, and my gosh, can we not wait for that one.
Beginning of what is sure to be very eventful playoffs for the 100% Cup Series. I'm joined alongside the ever-famous James East, alongside also producer Carlos Acosta, the man making it happen. Hopefully less technical difficulties tonight than our last broadcast together. And I'll tell you what, James, this is going to be quite the race. We're here at a track that most would consider one of the most difficult ovals on the circuit. And we're at the beginning of the playoffs where the points picture for some of these guys is looking pretty dire. We have 4 drivers that are all tied 1 point out of the playoffs. What is it going to take to make sure that you're no longer on the outside looking in at a track like Darlington?
First of all, thank you for having me, man. Always a great time being here with both yourself and Carlos, the world-famous producer. We got the A-team in the booth tonight, so expecting a lot of fun up here as well as on track. Darlington, one of those tracks you've got to be very, very careful at. But this is also the opportunity in the season where you can't really afford to be careful anymore. You're going to have all these drivers charging hard to advance themselves in the playoff. And if you do make a mistake, you can quickly find yourself watching your friends from the sideline as they chase the championship for the remainder of the round. So it's going to be interesting. Even watching practice, we've seen a lot of drivers getting loose. And then as the cars really tighten up here today, you might see some incidents as well. So this is going to be a tough one, I think, for racers to prepare for. Not really knowing what they're going to get into. It could be a night of short runs. We can see our kind of typical 100% green flag runs we've seen in the past. So don't rightly know what we're going to expect besides a whole lot of action out on track here today.
And you got to think these drivers are a little bit more nervous now than they were throughout the rest of the regular season, because a lot of these drivers, they got wins early on. We had a lot of various winners this season, unique winners. And when that happens, you get that win, you get locked into the playoffs, and you can kind of coast through the rest of the season until playoff time. You can experiment with the car, the setups, the strategies, and kind of figure things out and take it easy. But once these playoffs begin, you no longer have that luxury of just being able to coast around. It is absolutely go time for all 16 of these playoff-eligible drivers, and of course the drivers in this race that did not make the playoffs, but they're still here racing for that trophy, racing for the prize, and they want to get a win just as much as anybody else, maybe even more so in the playoffs. I mean, if you're somebody who didn't make the cut line, you didn't quite get into the playoffs, sometimes that makes you want to come out and win even more.
And all these guys have their sponsors they want to represent. That's the thing, racers race, so you're not going to see a whole lot of guys that maybe didn't get into the playoffs that just kind of sit out for the rest of the season, because these guys want to come out here and they want to run with their friends, their competition, and there's teams out there and play as well, so trying to help teammates. Now, Andre, what I think is very interesting, the first few rounds of the playoff, pretty difficult tracks all the way around. We've got Darlington tonight, we've got Richmond, we've got Bristol. So not really a lot of cookie cutters going into the first few rounds, and I think this may weed out the non-technical drivers pretty quickly and maybe see if that's going to change how it's going to run throughout the season or throughout the chase, as then we go to Las Vegas, Talladega, Charlotte, a little bit more quote-unquote standard tracks the guys may be used to. Actually, I take that back. Charlotte's the Roval, so anything but standard about that one. So I don't know. It's going to be an interesting chase all the way through as we start whittling off our drivers, and I think we're going to see a lot of big moves early on from all the guys.
Of course, the 100% Cup Series does follow as closely as we can the real-life NASCAR schedule, and I think that's one area where I think we can both agree, James. I mean, NASCAR, you hit the nail on the head when you said it's going to be an interesting playoffs when it comes to the track selection, because you're right, this first round does not really give you much in the way of quote-unquote standard tracks that these drivers might feel comfortable at. Just a lot of unique circuits that we're going to be making our way around and trying to get some points while we're doing it. So it's going to be absolutely interesting, as the drivers have only about 30 seconds left in this practice session. And I've noticed a lot of drivers running up towards the wall. I think the high line may be the preferred line if what I'm seeing holds true. Now, of course, that could change as the race goes on. Rubber gets laid down in various lanes. The track temp changes. Sometimes the drivers make setup changes, and you never really know where they're going to run later on. But right now, it seems like they're all digging that high line.
Yeah, it's one of those things. You run the high line for as long as you can until it doesn't work anymore, and that's going to be interesting. Once the cars tighten up and we start getting a little bit more single file action, I think they may calm down a little bit out on track, but these opening few laps, when you have the rubber to run 2-3 wide and take some alternative rounds and around the racetrack, it's going to make it very interesting. But we're going to get ready to take it to tonight's grid for the main event. 500 miles, 367 laps, guaranteed to be a good time out there today.
It is absolutely going to be quite the event out there tonight, and we're going to let these guys get in there. Sitting on the pole is going to be Jonathan Delaney. Now, this is a driver who's had a lot of success this year, a lot of wins. I think the most wins out of anybody. So to see him on the pole and starting out the playoffs strong, maybe not a surprise to a lot of guys, although he's probably coming seeking a little bit of redemption. If you remember, his last attempt at Darlington didn't end so well. It actually ended prematurely at the hands of the driver starting alongside him. Cameron Stone in that number 57 machine is going to be rolling off second. And again, these two drivers, not only do they have a little bit of history in that they're going to be owner and driver next year, Jonathan Delaney is going to be driving for Cam, but also those two drivers are the drivers who wrecked each other for the win, basically handing it to the driver who's starting in P3. Bryson Hixenbaugh inside row 2 in the number 63 Huggers Orange Machine. Dustin Hall to his outside, another driver who has a win this season, back in spring Talladega. Looking further back from him, you've got Kevin Steele and Dakota Knoll with a great qualifying effort. And a little bit further back from them, of course, you've got Brandon Pierce, you've got Josh Ward, and it was surprisingly far back on the grid as they stand right now, Robert Miller in the number 10. Now, this is a driver who nearly won last time we came to this track, but he ran out of tires. He mismanaged his strategy, found himself one set short versus the rest of the field, and that was all she wrote. So he will be starting this race back there in the 4th row on the outside. A little further back, you've got Josh R. Ward alongside Sean O'Brien Jr., Damaris Hickenbottom alongside Cody Bird. And just to get through the rest of them before we hit green, Cody Strom, Tyler Pinsino, Randy Drumhiller, Kevin Blackwell, Lucas Hoytsma, Jason Chambers, Devin Medeiros, Brandon White, R.J. Root, Alex Princeton, Ryan Samuelson, they went back too far there, Jason Taylor, Mason Lowry, and that's going to round out your field. That number 56 will be the final car rounding out the grid. Mason Lowry, we'll talk about him a little bit later on. I'm sure he wasn't even going to make this race with some health concerns, but here he is trying to make up some points, keep himself in the playoffs. And the pace car, James, is making that hard left turn, and these drivers' heart rate's got to be through the roof as they wait to see when does Jonathan Delaney start him. He stacks the field up a little bit, gets a good jump on the inside, and Cameron Stone with the wheel spin on the outside.
Yeah, it's kind of odd to see. That may be signifying that he's set up for a very long run, already that loose off the very beginning. So kind of odd to see. Stone gets just a dismal start on that one. That allows Hicksonbaugh to slide his way up into second place early on in number 63 machine. As we've got a little bit of action happening out on track already. But right now it's Delaney, Hicksonbaugh, Stone, Hall, Knoll, your top 5 drivers trying to put on some moves early on. And it looks for the most part like everybody's willing to click off single file here. So looks to be a little bit calmer than I expected on the start, despite seeing Cameron Stone's rough launch on that one.
Yeah, you'd think that wheel spin would get the accordion effect going, and in a way it sort of did, but everybody was able to kind of keep clear and make sure they got single file. And I think this is the kind of racing, as Cameron Stone gets a little loose again, maybe struggling with the handling, as he's going to get overtaken by that number 1 machine almost. But yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of patient racing early on. Nobody wants to be the guy that comes into the playoffs and immediately has a bad enough run that their entire playoff run is jeopardized right out the gate. So I think a lot of these guys are going to be patient, get a feel for the car, and they're going to play it smart. They're going to update their strategy and their driving style as the race progresses. But overall, their mind is not at the beginning of this race. It's at that checkered flag.
I wonder what Cameron Stone has going on in his Ford Mustang, currently 4th on track, down 2 positions so far. He's getting chased by Dakota number 5 machine, but it seems, I mean, that's the only thing I can think of is maybe he's really planning for some good long green flag runs and set the car up just so incredibly loose, so that way when it does finally tighten up, it'll handle a little bit better than some of the competition, because he's kind of fallen back pretty quickly here. We haven't really seen any gutsy moves, and like you said, nobody wants to be the guy that makes a move early on. As we see Hicksonbaugh, I believe he's out front, maybe making a move around Jonathan Delaney to take over the race lead, but these guys are being very patient. Again, it's a long format race, and especially the opening playoffs round, nobody wants to be the guy binning a race car, or worse, binning all your friends and having to go back to the hauler and explain to the team what happened. So I think what we're going to see here is drivers taking the opportunity when it seems very safe to do so, not trying to risk anything too early on, and again, is trying to avoid mistakes. That's kind of the name of the game for the 100% Cup Series, is he who crashes least wins more, I think is the age-old adage.
I'd have to agree there for sure, as we got some 2-wide action. Looks like some of these drivers at least growing a little impatient, wanting to make a move. That was Ryan Samuelson on the inside there in that number 16. He's going to slide up in front of the 44, make it work, grab himself some track position there. And, James, you mentioned possibly Cameron Stone set his car up to be really loose on the short run, so that on the long run it's better. And I think that's an interesting talking point, as on the left-hand side you can see the playoff drivers have now been lit up in reds. And also, I should point out, playoff drivers have red spoilers, splitters, and windshield markers, as we have a car sideways on the straightaway. Everybody's scrambling to try to avoid him. Jason S. Taylor among them, going clear down to the inside pit wall. And luckily, I think everybody got out of there unscathed.
Almost had the big one early on here at Darlington. As you're right, there were several cars sliding around the racetrack. The entire field kind of scattered there to avoid any carnage, but looks like we got through, so maybe that'll be the first big oh no moment for our competitors to realize, all right, again, we're very early on. We're only on lap about, I believe, 8 right now, so no sense risking it all early on. And I think that's what's happening right now, is we've got a lot of loose race cars out here at Darlington that are maybe not quite at the stage that they want before the car tightens up and it's a little bit easier to handle. And speaking of stage, they've got to go to lap 115 before we have our first stage caution, as we get our 3-wide TV multicam replay. And that was a great shot of those guys able to save it out there, as it is very, very close moments early on.
And that's how those cars are going to be early in this run. You're going to have so much rotation out of them. It's going to be easy to get a little bit loose. I mean, from that replay, it looked like that spin started in the middle of the corner, and it just sort of progressed, and he stayed sideways until he got to the straightaway, at which point it kind of snapped back around the other way, got into the wall. And when you're on these colder tires, the tires that are not quite worn out, eventually the car is going to tighten up, like you mentioned in practice there, and it's going to get tighter and tighter and tighter. But on these fresh tires, that car is going to be an absolute handful And of course, coming out of turn 4, that's going to be, you're coming out of the most off-throttle time I think you're going to have on the entire circuit. So it's a lot of off-throttle time in 3 and 4, getting back on the throttle, using that torque. You can spin those rear tires and get yourself a little sideways if you're not careful.
Yeah, a lot of horsepower trying to get put down early on, and drivers usually want to go, go, go. It's tough to train yourself to, take it easy the first few laps, and these guys face maybe the first 20 laps until the tires really start to come in for you. As these guys shuffling positions around just a little bit, Robert Miller, he's up 4 spots in his number 10 Toyota Camry, currently running 4th as we're looking at number 10 machine right now, as he's trying to advance up to the field as well. So drivers making moves. Robert Miller, again, up 4 spots, making it look relatively easy, but he's having to battle with the likes of Dustin Hall, Cameron Stone, and try to work his way up to Jonathan Delaney. There's so many talented guys out here. If you find yourself making any sort of little mistake or bobble, you can quickly get swallowed up by your competition around you. So very interesting to see how this is going to work, but Miller figuring something out early with his short run, up 5 spots already, and really not slowing down much.
Now, you'd think with all the cars that he's had to battle with all of the pace that he's been carrying, you'd think he's wearing through his tires pretty quick. But no, his pace is remaining one of the fastest cars on the track. He is closing in on Jonathan Delaney. Give him a few laps, he's going to be right up there battling for second, which, of course, is probably what Bryson wants to see up there in the lead. I mean, if he can get the number 9 and the number 10 battling with each other and maybe pull away further into that clean air, get himself out of their drafting distance, that would be beneficial to him. But Robert Miller, he's a force to be reckoned with at any track. But we know, like I said, from the last time we came here, he is really good at Darlington. This is a track that he does seem to have figured out. Just something about it jives with him really well. And he told me before the race, he might have ran out of tires last time, but that is not a mistake that he is keen on repeating. He is going to be very conservative with the amount of sets he has behind the wall, very conservative on his strategy. But I think that's the only area of this race that he will be conservative in, because when it comes to driving, we've seen a lot of aggression early on out of that 10, and it's paying off.
Yeah, a lot of good driving up front and a little bit of careful, measured aggression. And even all the way further in the back as we're watching Alex Princeton, the number 19 driver, as well as I believe it's going to be Mason Lowry, who's had a bit of internet connection issues. These guys are just still battling for a top 20 spot. Again, it's the top 16 drivers in the playoffs that are going to transfer when we kind of shrink this field down to 12 drivers. And I mean, we're seeing great action all the way to the back as right around Alex Princeton. Again, he's 19th place on track in the number 19 machine. We've seen these guys going 2 and 3 wide for a few laps in a row on the broadcast, as now Princeton's going to have to hold off Medeiros, Lowry, McRae. Again, these are guys we're kind of used to calling out front, and now they find themselves middle or back of the pack, still all chasing that playoff position.
Well, and there's a good reason Mason Lowry had to start in the back. He had to take a provisional. He did not qualify for this event. He did not turn a lap. He was having some health concerns. Prior to this race, he was running a fever of nearly 103 is what he told me. And he wasn't sure what was going on or what the issue was. He was not feeling up to par. He thought he might miss this race entirely. But this morning, the fever broke. He started feeling a little bit better. He's still not 100%, but he said, you know what, I'm good enough to race. So here he is trying to wheel that 56 around this circuit and hopefully keep himself in the playoffs.
It's going to be tough, especially how mentally taxing these 100% length races are. Granted, it's not quite as physically demanding as driving a real car, but you've got guys sitting in a rig for several hours on end and having to be laser focused the entire time. Any mistakes at the 100% Cup Series can end in disaster, but especially at a track such as Darlington, where you do not have a lot of room in every literal sense of the word to make any mistakes, as you can find yourself touching that outside wall. And I think we're going to see that later on as driver attrition comes into play. Guys are going to start making mistakes, maybe going to the corners a little bit deeper than they plan to, and start to put on some of those world-famous Darlington race stripes. But for now, again, we're 20 laps in, or almost 20 laps in. These guys have been running very, very clean so far, not having too many issues. As we've focused on Bryson Hixenbaugh, he's got about 9/10 of a second advantage over second place Delaney, who's accompanied by Robert Miller as well. And just out front, clicking off laps, and really not a care in the world right now. He's got clean track all the way around him, or until he gets about halfway to the straightaway where he's going to start lapping traffic. But these guys just putting their head down and just trying to hit their marks here today.
I think that's a good way to put it. You know, when it comes to that 63 team, there's been a lot of talk around the garage, what's going on with Bryson. He's won some races this year, but the amount of wins he's gotten this season has not compared to last year. And it just hasn't seemed like he's had much momentum these last few weeks. So coming into the playoffs, I know Bryson told me he was really putting in a lot of practice and a lot of focus that maybe he didn't have in the regular season. He decided, all right, now is go time. No more dilly-dallying. We mentioned before on previous broadcasts that it is highly likely Bryson Hicksonbaugh will be retiring from league racing at the end of this season. So I'm sure nobody's more motivated to go out on top than the guy who will be stepping out of the seat when the season is said and done. So Bryson, very motivated, I'm sure. Again, driving out to about a second lead over Jonathan Delaney, who is slowly falling clutches to Robert Miller in the number 10. So that clean air, I think that's a huge thing, James. I think at a track like Darlington, where the track is so narrow and you have so few options when it comes to lane choice, if you can put yourself in that clean air, that you have a lot of advantage that these guys behind you don't have. So Hicksonbaugh, probably on cloud 9 right now.
We talk about it every week that it's a game of attrition, and when you're out front and you've got that clean track, you only have to worry about what you're doing. You don't have to worry about it so much about driving the rearview mirror, watching what the guys behind you are doing, how hard they're pushing, if they're going to maybe force you to run a pace that you're not quite comfortable with. So it's just such an advantage to be able to, you don't want to say relax a little bit, but even just stretching the fingers on your steering wheel as you go down the straightaways and just take a bit of a mental breather. We always say you have $1 worth of focus to spend every lap, and you might see about 20 cents being spent in each corner, and then you use those straightaways to relax a little bit, get your mind right before going back into it once more. And as Hicksonbaugh's find out, he's got about a second gap over Delaney. He's kind of in his own world right now and just focusing on what he's doing and doesn't have to worry too much about what's happening around him. As we've seen him pick up one-lap drivers so far, I believe that may have been Brandon White, number 86 machine, that Hicksonbaugh was able to get around. But even then, lap traffic doing their best to yield the preferred line to the race leaders and not wanting to interfere with a race that they're not quite involved in right now.
Yeah, like you said, I don't think any of the lap traffic wants to interfere too much with the race for the lead or anybody's playoff standings if they're not in the playoffs themselves. But I will say Darlington is a tough track to be a lap car. It is so tough to give the leaders room at a track so narrow, especially as the run goes on and the drivers start to kind of separate in what lane they prefer. Some drivers are going to like the top, some drivers are going to like the bottom, but as a lap car, when they're closing in, you don't necessarily know what lane they're going to take. So all you can do is pick one, stick to it, and hope that they can get around you. But even if you do your absolute best and you don't do anything wrong, sometimes that closing rate causes cars to get together, and there can be some issues between leaders and lap cars at a track like Darlington. And of course, that's what Bryson is hoping doesn't happen, as he does approach his teammate, Cody Bird, in that number 13. I'm sure his teammate's not going to give him too much of a hassle, but that difficulty in being the lap car, it only increases on older tires because your car becomes a lot less maneuverable, a lot less freedom in how you drive that machine. So it can be very difficult to navigate around these leaders, and it'll be something to watch all night long, because if we keep green like we have been, 26 laps under green, there's going to be a lot of traffic for these drivers to deal with tonight.
It's one of my favorite things to see as well, especially in race leagues where everybody's so clean and talented. Green flag pit stops are probably one of my favorite things to call in the broadcast booth, because it allows the guys to show their strategy off the track as well as their driving ability. So it becomes a bit of a game to the guys going, all right, if I pit now, I can carry a little bit lower lap time for the remainder 20 laps or whatever it may be. And then it gets more exciting as well as we get tires out there with mixed strategies. We have a little bit of smoke in front of the leader. That was going to be the number 8 machine, I believe, of Raymond Root, who had a bit of a problem, able to collect himself and avoid getting into Bryson. But to touch back on what I was saying, as these guys come out with different sets of tires, you're going to see a lot of different speeds between the guys on the newest set versus the guys that are trying to go for a bit of an overcut. It can get really exciting really quickly as the guys are trying to dice through each other out here.
I would have to agree there. It does get really exciting once those green flag pit stops do commence. In Darlington, it's got a pretty interesting pit road. It's a little bit curved on either end and fairly narrow. The entry point for Darlington is incredibly narrow, and you have to turn really sharp out of the already tight turns 3 and 4. And we've seen some issues. We've seen in the past, some of these drivers having issues getting on pit road. Maybe they don't make the turn quite sharp enough to get into those sand barrels, or they make the turn too sharp and they spin out. It's a tough pit road to enter, and these drivers are going to have to do everything they can to make sure they remain focused that they have the absolute best stop they can have. Circling back around to RJ Root and that number 8 who had that issue a lap or two ago, I've been keeping an eye on that number 8, and he really seems to be struggling with the handling. Now, I'm not sure if that's down to just the setup itself or possibly due to some rear end damage that I'm noticing on that number 8. Now, aero can be really important at Darlington. This is a very fast track for how tight these corners are and how physically demanding this track can be on the actual equipment. It's a very fast track. I mean, they're getting up to 180 plus at the end of these straightaways. And if you have aero damage when you turn that car in, sometimes you don't know what that car is going to do. So RJ Root kind of has an uphill battle acquiring a little bit of damage early on.
I think he just came into pit lane as well as Tyler in the number 2 machine, the lone Canadian out on track. So 2 drivers. And Raymond's case, maybe making some adjustments on the car, but while taking some fresh tires and seeing if he can get it more dialed in. I'm not sure why Tyler came in as well, but he's got a long pit stop, so he may have some damage as well on the number 2 machine. So this is not one of those nights you want to find yourself a lap or several laps down, as is the case of Raymond Root, but maybe just doing whatever he can to try and make some changes on the pit lane to try and just make it more salvageable for the evening, because this is a long race. Again, 500 miles. If you're not happy early on, you're gonna have a long night, and you're not gonna have a whole lot of fun either.
Yeah, that's always been my mentality. When I get in a car and I notice right away that the setup's not where I want it, that's the first thing on my mind is what's the earliest I can pit? What's the earliest I can make some changes? Because the longer you drive a car that doesn't agree with you, the more frustrated you get. You know, the car can actually be genuinely anger-inducing to drive if it handles poorly enough. And of course, the more unsettled you get, the more angry you get, the more mistakes you're going to make. So you want to get that car handling as good as you can get. As we do have an issue, it looks like on the back stretch. And also, I want to point out another car with damage, and this is heavy damage. The rear end of the number 13 has been beat in on both sides. Both taillights are a few inches further forward on the geometry of that car than they really should be. Cody Bird had a phenomenal qualifying effort tonight. He ended up qualifying P12, something that he did want mentioned on the broadcast. He was very proud of that qualifying effort. So I wondered, I noticed right away that he was kind of falling through the running order pretty quickly, and I didn't know if that was intentional or not. But seeing
Andre,
this damage,
I don't mean to cut you off, but we've got a crash forming. Dakota Knoll, Ryan Samuelson, both involved, I believe, on the front straight. No caution coming out. There's cars everywhere. Oh, my. That is going to be a rough start for Knoll and Samuelson as they're going to rapidly fall down the field. We saw that just out of the camera, the corner of the camera, but, man, that was almost probably the first caution. Again, didn't mean to cut you off there, Andre. Those guys were yard sailing almost in front of the leaders.
No need to apologize there. I ramble quite a bit. You can cut me off anytime. But yeah, no, that was very disappointing for Noel because he had such a good qualifying effort. Like we said, he was up there towards the front of the field. We don't normally see Dakota Knoll as necessarily a hot lapper. So to see him qualify really well, I had some high hopes as they come through 3 and 4 on the replay. Or I believe, is that 1 and 2? Can't quite tell, but a little bit of contact in the middle of the corner, it looked like. They sorted out. And okay, he bounced off the wall on the front straightaway. And the crazy thing is, James, those aren't the only drivers that have trouble with the straightaway walls at this track. Because you're kind of exiting the corner at an angle and the straightaways aren't perfectly straight, some of these drivers do scrape the wall. And of course, the way iRacing kind of calculates impacts with the wall and the physics of it all, sometimes you kind of get ejected off of the wall like we saw with Dakota Knoll, and that causes a little bit of issues. And if there's anybody behind you, then of course that's going to be very disastrous. So unfortunate for both those drivers early into this event.
Yeah, it's one of those things. iRacing, it's a fickle beast. There's some days where it glues you into the outside wall or whatever wall you hit, and you're absolutely just lawn darted there. And there's other days and certain tracks that will completely eject you across the raceway. I remember Charlotte, one of those tracks that kind of acts as the trampoline with the walls, and you just give it a little bit of a love tap, and next thing you know, you get absolutely sent across the racetrack. And just like you said, Andre, if there's any other cars in the way, they're about to have a really rough night too, as they're going to get absolutely collected. So one of the drivers able to save on to that. I mean, that, in all fairness, I'm very shocked it wasn't a caution, but sometimes iRacing causes or throws the caution prematurely, and sometimes they don't throw it for what you and I would think is a needed call. So interesting to see how the built-in iRacing officials handled that one.
Yeah, and you know, Darlington always has been one of the more finicky tracks when it comes to how they determine cautions. I mean, obviously, as far as we're concerned, almost anywhere down to the inside wall here is racing surface. I mean, we see drivers go down there all the time, especially if they get in a 3 or 4 wide situation. But technically, that is the apron of the track. And as far as iRacing is concerned, if there are multiple cars wrecking on the apron and they're not a threat to the cars around them, then that's not a yellow flag. So even though they're kind of in the racing surface, the simulator doesn't always see it that way. So sometimes we've had issues in races prior that have kind of stemmed from that, where there's cars wrecking and the game decided, hey, you know, this isn't a caution, and then you have a few more cars that pile in, and things just go very sideways very quickly. But again, it kind of speaks to the ability of all of these drivers. I mean, even those involved in that incident, to, you know, make sure that they were steering clear of the traffic, steering clear of the other cars, and everybody coming down that straightaway saw what was going on ahead of them. They were able to avoid it masterfully. So luckily, kind of avoided disaster. It's just one of those situations where now Dakota Knoll and the other driver involved have a bit of an uphill battle they got to face. They're going to be dealing with some wounded horses. Their cars aren't going to be in top shape. But I say it all the time. I think if you're going to make a mistake, if you're going to have a setback early on in the race, is the best time to have it, because that just gives you more time to make up for it later on.
Yes, I agree. I'd rather have a mistake early on than later on. As we're watching Hoytsma, he's battling hard with Hickenbottom. Behind them, they've got Mason Lowry still with the internet problems. These guys are trying to cut through traffic. We've got about 13 drivers still on the lead lap here, as Hickenbottom has been dicing through traffic, maybe making it look pretty easy. As now I believe that it's Preston McRae that will go a lap down. But all across the track here, from first to back to 20th, we've seen some great racing going on. And again, you touched it very, very well. The talent of all these drivers to either avoid incidents or, most importantly, not cause an incident really speaks to the talent and ability of all these drivers out on track. And that's why it's only attracts some of the best drivers on the iRacing service. It's full-length races with very competitive drivers. Nobody wants to run 500 miles of iPacing, so it really behooves everyone out on track to try and keep it clean and click off some laps. And again, very impressed with the guys out there today.
Yeah, especially at a track like Darlington, you don't want a bunch of cautions. I mean, this track is grueling enough as it is. It can really wear on your mental state and your patience almost, with as long as this race can be. I mean, 367 laps around a track where, you know, no two corners are the same, and oftentimes due to the tire wear, your car doesn't feel the same twice in a row in either of the corners. So it's very, very tough to navigate, and the more they can stay green, the quicker they get to the end of it, and the less chance they have of making mistakes or starting to get a little worn down. As now we got another car in threat of going a lap down. That's Mason Lowry in the 56. Bryson Hickenbaugh is closing in on him rather rapidly, and he's going to dive down to the bottom, which I find interesting. It seemed like the leader has kind of opted to take the top line when it comes to most lap traffic, but here he dove down low. Looks like he got around him no issue. On your screen right there, that's Jason Taylor in the 37 machine, another playoff hopeful. He was able to make it into the round of 16, and now he's sitting there in the top 10, having a pretty good points day. The problem, though, for a lot of these playoff contenders, you know, Damaris Hickenbottom, Mason Lowry, Preston McRae, they're having good days. You know, running 11th is not a bad day. But it seems like the playoff drivers are all having good days. And when everybody's having a good day, nobody is. It's going to make it really hard to make up points when, you know, what is that? 8 out of your top 9 are all playoff contenders.
Yeah, I was just noticing that as well. Only 2 drivers that are in that top 10 not in the playoff. That's Miller and I believe Hoytsman, who is currently running 10th. Now, Bird, he's, I think, our lowest back playoff driver right now, running 17th. So he's got a little bit of work to do. But again, it's very early on in the night. These guys are going to be able to develop their strategy as far as pit lane stops go as well. So I don't know. I wouldn't worry too much at this point that, hey, I'm not in a good spot for the playoffs. But everybody in that top 10's kind of got to keep mindful of who's driving around them, because if they do find themselves with any incidents at all, they are in trouble. There's not a lot of buffer room between themselves and the other playoff drivers to score some points, maybe have that room to make a mistake and drift to the back, because they're all playoff drivers right now. So, again, only 12 are going to make it to the first round, or the first cutoff, as we make it a little bit smaller field as we start with 16. So, I mean, the time to go is now for these guys, I would say.
And, you know, to tack on to that as well, these drivers also have to be mindful of not only incidents that could take them out of this race, But they got to be mindful of penalties, and there is a rule in this league that we have seen strike a number of drivers as the number 10 gets real up close and personal with a lapped car there coming through the corner. But when you get too many incident points, if you race on iRacing, you know them as the 2x, the 4x. If you get too many of those per race, the admins will seat you down. They'll say, "Hey, you had too many incident points. You went beyond our limit. You were at fault for too many of them. You're going to be sat out the next week." The playoffs are not the time to be sat out. Now, last season, Cameron Stone, the driver currently running fourth, he actually got penalized and was suspended during a race in the playoffs. He had to come back and win if he wanted to make it to the next round. He did. He came back to Bristol, dominated the race, ended up getting himself the win, moving on to the next round, and then he became the champion at the end of the season. So these drivers do not want to be accruing any penalties, but if they do, it would put them in a very rough situation where they basically would have to win.
Maybe the motivating factor that some drivers need to really make something happen. With some guys drive a little bit better when they're having a bad day and may be able to carry a bit more aggressive pace than they would in the past. And then some drivers don't like the pressure as much, and they'd rather stay out there, click off laps, and not have any big issues. So it's going to be depending on what the drivers are most comfortable with. Like Hixenbaugh out front, and he's still extending that gap to about 1.5 seconds over Delaney. And his only real worries so far this race have been cutting through lap traffic, which, to be fair, can be a little bit dicey as everybody's tightening up. It's hard to make moves through the field as we are already 50 laps on a set of tires for the majority of this field. Not many drivers inside the top 20, actually no drivers inside the top 20 have come into pit lane yet. So these guys are going to run it all the way to the empty if given the option. Now, Andre, a question for you. You may know because I certainly do not. Do you have any idea of what the pit window is going to be for these guys here today?
I'm not entirely certain. I think the last time we came to this track, Bryson Hixenbaugh told me that they had about 62 to 63 laps of fuel, if I'm remembering correctly, which I'm probably not because I have the memory of a goldfish. However, that seems to be the number that's sticking out in my mind. So they could go quite a ways, I'm sure. As it looks like we have issues on the backstretch, two cars careening towards the inside wall.
That's going to be oh, man. Robert Miller and Hickenbottom.
Robert Miller, our third place driver. And the rear end of that car is gone. Damaris looks to be a little better off. He's got some damage to the front and rear end of that car, but it is operational at the very least. Not something that I can say about the number 10 machine who was taking a tow.
Now, there's still no caution here, right?
No, we are under green, it would appear.
Oh, boy.
And that's going to be the day done for Robert Miller, coming back from a brief hiatus in the league and looking to be very hopeful in this race. And now all of that just absolutely squashed. And I got to wonder what exactly happened there. I mean, it seemed like obviously those two cars came together. I'm just not sure of the exact details. But, man, at the end of the straightaway, too, that's what kind of befuddles me as we take a look at the replay here. Top of your screen, this is the incident. There's Damaris Hickenbottom. He's down low. Gets a little bit loose coming out of the corner, it looks like. He kind of darts it down the straightaway. Robert Miller also a little loose. And, okay, the number 9, and then it's 09, I apologize, comes back up the track, gets the air taken off his spoiler, and then from there, both drivers go for an absolutely wild ride. I would say that was just a bit of an awareness issue.
Yeah, if car gap, and there was car. So it's interesting, unfortunate really, to see that happen. It looked like, yeah, he was trying to keep the rear end underneath him, but just never quite got it settled in the 09 machine. And unfortunately, Hickenbottom, who was trying to charge through there, Hickenbottom was the one who got a little bit loose. It looked like Miller just, as he was trying to charge through the pack there, not able to make it happen. Now, Miller was not in playoff contention here today, but correct me if I'm wrong, Hickenbottom, yes, he was one of our playoff drivers. So this is not the opening round that he was looking for, as he's going to watch a lot of other drivers, I think at this point, check out and leave him, as he's going to have a lot of aero damage. It'll be interesting to see how long he's in his pit stall for, trying to get some repairs done, because that was a massive hit for both the 09 and the 10.
Yeah, and as you can see from the graphic there, Damaris was among those tied 1 point out of the round of 12. Alongside Chad Edwards, Sean O'Brien Jr., and Cody Bird. Now, Chad Edwards is not in this event, so that kind of helps Damaris, but I tell you what, wrecking like that early on, that hurts the playoff hopes, especially when you've got drivers like Mason Lowry who've worked their way up into the top 10. Just an absolutely frustrating start to the playoffs, I'm sure, for Damaris. And I know for a fact Damaris put a lot of practice into this race. He knew that Darlington was not a track that he was super fond of, and he hasn't really done too well here in the past. And he told us personally he was just putting in a lot of time and a lot of practice, more so than usual. And I tell you what, James, there's nothing more frustrating as a driver than dedicating a portion of your life. I mean, because this, at the end of the day, this is something that they're all very passionate about, but it is a simulator, it is a game, and if you really want to get good at this, if you really want to make sure that you're up where you want to be, you got to dedicate a certain amount of your time. And so when you dedicate that time to this service and then it doesn't pan out the way you want it to, it can be really frustrating. So I feel terrible for Damaris. I mean, fantastic driver. I mean, it's not over yet. He's got more races left in these here playoffs, and he's got more racing left in this race. I mean, we're only on lap 60, so we'll see how much damage he can get repaired and what he can do with it. You can't count anybody out at this point, but just sad to see.
Yeah, we've got a few drivers initiating their pit stop here at around lap 60. Leader coming down pit road as well. That's Hixenbaugh making his way in the number 63 machine. Now, something to keep an eye on for our fans at home. We've seen races here at the 100% Cup Series won or lost on pit road. I can't tell you how many times we've seen a driver come in just a few miles an hour faster or even crash into pit road and find themselves with a substantial penalty that pretty much ruins their entire race. But it looks like Hixenbaugh able to get in nice and clean. Delaney, O'Brien, and Taylor opting to stay out. It'll be interesting to see if Lowry, Princeton, and Stones, actually I take that back, Stones already pitted. It's going to be interesting to see how many drivers stretch out possibly that lap 62 window that you were talking about earlier, because that's pretty much now, as Delaney is staying out, putting in some work. Bryson Hixenbaugh in and out of his pit box in about 14.5 seconds. So that is about the average time for 4 fresh Goodyears in a tank of gas. So now Hixenbaugh is going to go out with 3 drivers on the lead lap and the rest of the field down. But here comes Delaney, the number 9 machine. He's going to come into pit road as well. Let's see if O'Brien and Taylor follow suit, as they're about 16 seconds back from the race leader. But looks like for our first green flag pit stop, things have went pretty well for the guys out there on track.
Yeah, almost all of our leaders had pretty flawless pit stops, good entries, good exits, good pit times. Although Jonathan Delaney did lock up the tires a little bit coming into pit road, and he was also a little bit sideways. So maybe pushing the envelope a little bit in that number 9. I mean, we know John, if anybody's going to push the envelope, it's always going to be the driver of that number 9. But as long as he didn't acquire himself a speeding penalty or anything of that sort, I think he should be good to go. He only pitted 1 lap later than Bryson and 2 laps later than Cameron Stone. So really, I think for most of these leaders, everything should play out pretty kosher. The question now is, they're pretty much set to the end of this stage. So they don't got to worry about saving. They don't got to worry about, fuel mileage. We pretty much know if they need to get to lap 115 and they can pretty much make it to lap 120 from where they pitted, then they're good to go. But do you think it would be worth it to maybe take it a little easy early on in this final stint of the stage just to save tires for the end of the stage?
I don't know, because that's one of those things. I'm assuming most people on the lead lap will come in for that stage break and take 4 more tires. Or, I mean, Andre, how many sets of tires do we have here today? Because I know Jason Taylor, number 37, he's coming in now with a late pit stop on lap 64, so able to stretch it out just a little bit. But how many tires do they have to play with today? Are they going to have the double stint tires at all here today? Or is it, if they time it right, will they be able to grab a fresh set on pit road every time the stage ends? Or I guess twice the stage is how the math breaks down.
Yeah, so they have 13 sets of tires, I believe, so they shouldn't have to double stint tires. I think the only time that's going to come in would be if we got a lot of cautions, which we have not. The game has been very generous, keeping it under green. But what I meant more was not so much saving tires for, so that you don't have to take them at the end of the stage. I mean saving tires so that at the end of the stage, you have a little bit left and you can push your car a little bit harder than the next guy to get to that green and white checker.
And yes, that makes sense, especially in these long format green flag races. I think that would make sense. Not pushing too hard too early on. And then some guys are valuing track position more than anything, as we see Hixenbaugh get right back out there and start clicking off fast laps. Delaney, he puts down the fastest lap of the race with a 28.67, but he's still about 7 seconds back from Hixenbaugh. So I think if you see somebody, to answer your question, I think it depends where you're at on track. If you're someone like Hixenbaugh who's out front with a very comfortable lead, you get that lead and then you can save tires in case you need it. While guys like Delaney that are 7 seconds back, if this was the last stage or the tail end of the race, you really don't have an option but to push and try and get up there to Hixenbaugh. So I think it's going to be one of those games on where you fall on the track spectrum as the race progresses tonight to see if it's going to be worth it saving, or if you find yourself where you're 7, 8 seconds back and you have no choice but to push early on. And that's where the advantage is really going to be for guys like Hixenbaugh that are out front, clicking off clean laps and not driving too hard as we see him doing the number 63 Chevrolet. He kind of gets to set his own pace here. He's got clean track in front of him. He's got over a 6-second gap over second place and really doesn't have to push too hard right now, and he gets to see what everybody else is doing, which I think that data he's collecting and watching everybody else is going to pay off big dividends as we get later on the race here today.
And I think another thing that Bryson has shown us is kind of how valuable, at least in the short run, a shorter stop strategy can be. I mean, he came in 1 lap sooner than Delaney, and it seemed like he extended the lead that he had going in by multiple seconds. So just that 1 lap on fresher tires, the fall off here at Darlington, it's always pretty extreme. But it seems like with the way that they've updated this track and the way that this package is, the tire wear is extremely, extremely difficult. And it's slowing these guys down quite a bit. So coming in just 1 or 2 laps sooner, Bryson showed us how important that is as he was able to extend his lead. But Delaney now on 1 lap fresher tires as they race their way to the end of the stage. Who knows? Maybe he can try to run him down from 6 seconds back. But it's going to be tough because, he's not just running down the leader, but as he's running him down, trying to navigate the lady in black, he's going to be dealing with all of the same lap traffic as we have Brian Samuelson in the wall, scraping that outside wall. And that right there, James, that's what I was kind of harping on at the beginning of the broadcast. As a lap car, it can be really, really hard to get out of the way and make sure you don't interfere. And right there, Samuelson did the only thing he could do. He saw a train of cars coming up behind him. There wasn't much space. All he could do was kind of grind up against the wall, give himself the Darlington stripe, and hope for the best.
No place to go as a lap car. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but through 3 and 4, you can try and get down low, but it's very flat. And if I remember the last time I raced here, a big bump coming out of 4 that can quickly upset your car and send you careening around. So it's one of those preferred lines. If you're not on the line, you're kind of in big trouble. So while these lap drivers are going to do their best to get out of the way, again, not a lot of real estate to make something happen. Now, while Hixenbaugh is trying to get through traffic at this point in the race, that has allowed Delaney to catch up by a couple of seconds. Now it's down to about a 5.7 second gap between your race leader, Hixenbaugh, and second place Delaney. Now, again, Hixenbaugh is dealing with a little bit more lap traffic than Delaney is, and Delaney has the luxury as well as having Hixenbaugh be the first car to punch through traffic, letting the lap cars know, like, all right, the leaders are coming through at this point in the race. Let's keep a little bit better eye on the rearview mirror as Hixenbaugh's trying to cut through, and they take it too wide coming out of turn 2. And, man, he's having to cut through a whole lot of traffic. Every time he does, it's slowing down his pace just a little bit, allowing Delaney to catch a 10th here, a 10th there, and whittle it back down to a 5-second flat time difference as it goes on. Oh, this is good.
Yeah, things are heating up. I did not expect the lap traffic to slow Bryson down quite as much as it is, but Delaney is closing this gap, and the lap cars, they're making it interesting. I mean, they're doing everything they can. As you can see, there's the lap time differentials. 2 tenths to Delaney, 8 tenths on lap 70. Then the advantage went back to Hixenbaugh by about a tenth, and then 200ths, and then lap 73. We're right back up to almost 8 tenths advantage to Delaney. So that 9 car is on rails. And, Bryson, the exact same way that the lap cars are hindered by how one lane this track can be, Bryson also is. I mean, you might be screaming at your screen saying, why doesn't Bryson just go down to the bottom, pass him on the low line, and call it good? Well, I think the real-life Xfinity race gave us a good example of why you don't do that. Today, in the real-life Xfinity race, Denny Hamlin went to pass a lap car in the last corner of the stage from the lead, but there was just not enough grip on the bottom. He got sideways, slid up into the lap traffic, ended up spinning himself out, and started a downward spiral that ultimately resulted in him not winning the race. So, as the leader, you can't really rely on that apron. There's just no grip down there. It's so flat. There's so much dust and marbles down there because nobody runs it, that if you put your car down there, you're putting yourself at an inherent risk. So Bryson kind of has to run his line, and he just has to wait for an opportunity to get around this lap traffic. And then once it presents itself, he can pounce on that. And luckily, things have cleared out a bit, and Delaney has kind of stalled out about 5 seconds behind Hixenbaugh, or at least luckily for Hixenbaugh. It's not luckily if you're Delaney. But the lap traffic really making things interesting, and there's been plenty of it. I mean, right now, looking at the scoring pylon, James, only 6 cars on the lead lap.
Yeah, that is not a lot, is how they say it in professional terms here in the broadcast booth. And you're right, it's Hixenbaugh, Delaney, Stone, Hall, Hoytsma, and O'Brien Jr. holding on to it here. It looks like some of the other guys maybe didn't have the pit cycles they wanted, but that's also to a testament to how fast the top 2 drivers are. It's Hixenbaugh out front. You got Delaney about 5 seconds back. Then you have to go back 18 seconds from the leader to get to Cameron Stone, who is 3rd on track. So Hixenbaugh has found a groove he's very happy settling in. Now, Delaney's been gaining a little bit of time the last couple of laps. I mean, last lap he's about 0.07 of a second slower than Hixenbaugh, but it's kind of tough to judge it on one lap, as these guys have both been dealing with so much traffic, as well as the tricky track of Darlington. Only able to run pretty much one groove, and you're at the mercy of lap cars in front of you to not make a mistake, having to trust everybody out on track from first all the way towards the very back to make sure none of your guys are going to make a mistake, as that was we just saw the number 37 machine get his lap back, I believe. That was Jason Taylor coming out. Taylor came in on lap 64 to get his lap back, but it's interesting to see the guys are able to carry a little bit different paces. Taylor trying to carry more speed early on, at least get on the lead lap in case the caution does come out. So this is, I think that's part of the strategy as well. We've got just so few drivers, 7 drivers on the lead lap. Some of these guys are going to be battling very, very hard to get back on the lead lap if at all possible. We've seen 2 very close calls where a caution could have very well come out, and I don't think any of these 15 drivers or so as it is that are laps down want to be caught in the worst spot possible if that caution does come out.
No, you are absolutely right. If you're caught a lap down or caught in a bad spot when that caution does come, that's going to be disastrous. Now, just a quick update on a couple of drivers. Drivers Dakota Knoll and Mason Lowry have both taken their cars behind the wall. I'm assuming Mason Lowry was due to internet issues. You mentioned that he was kind of struggling with that all night there, James. That is terrible news for Mason Lowry. However, that is possibly the saving grace for Damaris Hickenbottom. That's another driver who he's competing for outside of the playoffs that is now out of the event, and Damaris is still here. He's still turning laps. And so as long as he finishes ahead of them, which it's pretty much impossible for him not to, that's going to put him just inside of the playoffs by the end of this night.
See, that's the thing here with the Chase playoffs, Andre. There's no really throwaways or mulligans like there is during the regular season, where you have more ample opportunities to kind of correct your mistakes and have enough good nights to average it out. I mean, for this chase, you have 3 races that count, and if your competitors, the 12 drivers in front of you, have perfect 3 nights, and you have 1 mistake, it does not average out well in your favor. So it's going to be a game of consistency. Even if you're not at the very tippy top for the opening 3 rounds, you still want to be very consistent and not have to count on another racer to have a bad night to make up for your possible mistake. So Hixenbaugh in a great shot. Really, a lot of the drivers in a great shot. I think it's going to be Hickenbottom that's kind of on the bubble here and knows, all right, I've got to try and capitalize on tonight the best I can, because while Lowry is back behind the wall and done for the evening, Hickenbottom doesn't want to have to count on somebody else having a better night for the 2nd and 3rd round of the opening 3 nights of Chase races. He wants to be able to go out there, run fast for the next 2 races, and just focus on his own program instead of having to worry about what the other drivers are doing on track. And that'll also be a lot less stress as well for all these guys. If you can focus on what you're doing and not the other drivers, it just kind of makes an easier show for you week in and week out.
It absolutely does. Now, we had a bit of a moment there about a lap ago with Jonathan Delaney. He had to kind of make an abrupt swerve out of the way as the lap traffic went side by side in front of him. And I think, you know, as well as I do, James, you make an abrupt movement at a track like Darlington, and that car is going to get away from you real quick. So Jonathan Delaney with a lot of car control to keep it underneath of him. But, you know, he's not the only one dealing with that lap traffic. Following along with Bryson again, you can see he is just on the bumper of these cars in front, not quite getting the opportunity to make the pass yet. I believe that's Sean O'Brien right in front of him. That's P6 under fire and potentially going a lap down, depending on how this plays out. But This lap traffic has really made it interesting, and I'm just astounded with how much these leaders have been weaving in and out of traffic, how few issues we've really had. I mean, when it comes down to it, the issue with Robert Miller and Damaris was, I believe they were on the same lap when that happened, so that wasn't even a lap traffic issue. That was more just a racing incident. But these drivers have done such a phenomenal job. I've seen so many races at Darlington, even in real life, where you get to a certain point where you pass so many cars and then your luck runs out. You can make so many passes clean, but eventually something seems like it's bound to happen. And right now, everything's been really clear and clean for the leader. And I will say, I think Bryson's taken his time. I think he's got the car to get around O'Brien as he now dives down low, but you can tell he rode behind him for a good couple laps there. And it was mostly just because he was waiting for the opportunity. Delaney closed in almost a second in that time span. But when you got a 5-second lead, there's no reason for Bryson to rush it.
Yeah, I agree, Andre. I mean, you want to take your time, see what your competitors do, and see what their line may be through some of the corners, because A, they may have had something figured out that you haven't quite thought about yet, and B, it gives you a plan to make your next pass and not put your race car at danger. As we saw Hixenbaugh get around O'Brien relatively smoothly in the number 65 machine. Now he's about to catch up to Jason Taylor, the number 37 machine. Taylor, he's 5th on track right now. So that's two things to point out here, is how fast Hixenbaugh has been all night to lap all the way up to the tail end of 5th place. And as well to brag on Jason Taylor, the number 37 driver, the Chevrolet. He is up 21 positions here today. He's got something figured out well, and Taylor came in on one of the latest pit stops of the race on lap 64. So it seems that pit strategy is working out well for the driver of the number 37 machine. And again, it circled right back at how fast Hixenbaugh has been all night to work his way all the way up. I'm interested to see, as yes, that's Jason Taylor as well as Dustin Hall right in front of the race leader. So Hixenbaugh, he's making moves here, and he's about to lap all the way up to podium contention.
And this is such a stark difference, James, from what we saw last season. Obviously, or not last season, I apologize. The last time we came here, earlier on in this season here at Darlington for the first race, Bryson won the race. He is trying to go back-to-back here at Darlington. However, while he won the race, he didn't lead a lot of it. He was definitely the 3rd or 4th quickest car on track almost the entire night. It was only the incident with Jonathan Delaney and Cameron Stone that really gave him the opportunity to make the move, get around them. He put himself in the catbird seat, and it worked out. He was able to get around them in the final corner and win the event. This domination that we're seeing out of him, I mean, we've seen Bryson dominate plenty of tracks, but it just seems like there's a difference here. From the last time we came here to now, he's figured something out. And whether it's the setup or just driving the car differently, there's something in that 63 machine that wasn't there before. And he is absolutely making mincemeat of this field. I mean, carving his way, like you said, all the way up to 5th and trying to put him a lap down. It is absolutely incredible. I mean, even 3rd place Cameron Stone is currently running 20 seconds back. The only driver that really has anything for him at this point in time is Jonathan Delaney in that number 9. But riding about 4.5 seconds back, he's not really much of a threat. So if you're Bryson, I mean, you got to think it's all about hitting your marks. It's all about being smart and safe. It's not about going fast right now, because that's not needed.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody's told Bryson that, because he's looking like he's going for bragging rights here as he took a quick peek to the inside of Jason Taylor. Taylor's the number 37, the navy blue Morton Salt racing machine. Hixenbaugh in the bright red and green, almost watermelon painted paint scheme. So it's interesting to see just how aggressive Bryson has been. I say aggressive just based on the speed he's carrying. His driving doesn't scream aggressive, as he's been very careful picking his spots on where he's going to make something happen, but he's getting closer and closer to Jason Taylor. And Delaney, who has the luxury of being a little bit less, or having to be a little bit less cautious than Hixenbaugh. Hixenbaugh's being the first driver to punch through all this traffic. He's only gaining a 10th here, 10th there, as that last time by Delaney was about a 10th faster than a Hixenbaugh, but still right at 4 seconds flat back as Hixenbaugh grabs another spot. There's only 3 drivers on the lead lap here today at Darlington. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen anything like this before.
It's definitely a strange occurrence. Now, We have seen races like this in the 100% Cup Series before, and genuinely, I think the only time I've seen races like this is at the hands of Bryson Hixenbaugh. I believe it was Richmond, where at one point Bryson had the entire field one lap down. He had lapped the entire field, went on to win the race. Sometimes Bryson's ability, it's got to scare even himself sometimes, just how fast he can be when he turns it on. And that's why we call him the robot. It just seems like sometimes he comes to the track, he unloads the car, and it's just pure focus from that point onwards. And he just doesn't make that many mistakes. And it seems like during the playoffs, he has just taken that focus. He's cranked it up to 11. And that's a scary thing for the competition. I mean, a lot of drivers have kind of, playfully joked around with Bryson saying, oh, you're washed up. You're not the Bryson that we knew last season. You're just not the dominating factor that you used to be. Well, it seems like right now Bryson's back, and he's back in a big way.
Yeah, he's charging hard. I'm keeping an eye on live time and scoring as well. I'm going to be interested to see if he catches up at any point to Cameron Stone throughout this race. Stone currently in podium contention in the third place spot, driving his number 57 Ford Mustang. He's about 22 seconds back behind Bryson. Bryson's clicking off low 31, high 30-second or a 30-second lap time, so he's still getting faster, and he's about half a second faster than Stone has been every lap for the last several laps. So I don't think we're going to see Hixenbaugh slow down much at all here today, as he's able to use that draft of lapped traffic to pull himself up just a little bit faster lap in and lap out, as drivers are doing their best to scatter out of the way as Hixenbaugh is charging through. And now every time Bryson's able to catch that draft of a competition driver as well, that gives him a little bit more breathing room as well against Jonathan Delaney, currently in second. Delaney's lost a little bit of time. He had it as low as a 4-second gap. Right now it's 4.7 seconds between Hixenbaugh and Delaney. And I think the robot or the machine is probably the most appropriate way I've heard somebody describe Bryson's driving so far this season. Just getting out there, clicking it off, and really just making it happen no matter what it takes.
Absolutely. It's been a dominating effort, and I'm sure the last thing he wants to see is any cautions or any mistakes. He's just got to keep it clean. Jonathan Delaney, though, you can't discount him either. I mean, it really says something when you've got 3 cars remaining on the lead lap, and one of them is within 5 seconds of the leader. So clearly very close in speed. Jonathan Delaney has a car that may be able to do something with Bryson Hixenbaugh, might be able to compete, especially, when we get on a restart. We haven't seen that number 9 in clean air yet, James. We've only seen him in traffic because he hasn't led the race. But if he gets a good restart at this stage and he gets out in front of that 63 somehow, who knows? Maybe we're going to see him driving away with it because he's got that clean air. He's got that advantage for a little while. Maybe that's the determining factor. We'll just have to wait and see. For now, running P2 in the stage, I mean, John can't really complain about that. Anytime you're getting good points and having a good points day, especially during the playoffs, then things are going pretty well. So I think for pretty much all of these top 3, it's just a matter of getting to lap 115, getting to the end of the stage, and not making any dumb mistakes. Don't get sideways, don't wreck yourself when you've got clearly really great cars. And for Stone, probably a little bit of added stress. Stay on the lead lap. Make sure that Bryson doesn't get to you. Make sure he doesn't put you a lap down. You don't want to have to take the lucky dog. You don't want to have to take a wave around. You want to be able to, if you're running third, you want to be able to start third in line. You don't want to be that far back. So Cameron Stone, luckily, seems like he's got the pace where he's not going to go a lap down. He's kind of hovered around 22 seconds back for the last lap or two. So Bryson not gaining substantially anymore. But it still is a threat. And if he had to take that lucky dog and go around and start a little bit further back in the grid, that would be really, really hurtful to his chances tonight.
Staying on lead laps, surprisingly not something the third place driver normally has to think about, but when Bryson flips the light switch and puts his head down, I think everybody's got to have that in the back of their head, because then you're going to have about 25 drivers all searching for that lucky dog position, trying to get back on the lead lap and maybe put some pressure on Hixenbaugh. Right now, Delaney might be one of the guys that we have to count on to make it happen, because we know if Bryson, when this stage starts again, if he can get out front and click something off, then he may have some pressure to deal with. But right now, Hixenbaugh out with that fresh air has extended that lead once again to 5 seconds. He's not having a lot of problems and no signs of slowing down here. He's been able to expertly navigate lap traffic, didn't have too many issues. And then I'm surprised, but also I'm not surprised at the dominant performance we're seeing out of the 63 here today. And I'm very impressed with the respect that other drivers are having on track, able to allow these race leaders. Oh, there we go.
The 07 car nose it into the inside wall. He's spinning around. Does it stay green? It is going to stay green for now, and I'm not sure how much front-end damage he has. He should be able to limp it back around to the pits, and we are going to stay green. I'm sorry to cut you off there, James, but that was right in front of a handful of cars there. That was kind of scary. I thought maybe they'd get involved, but luckily he got the right angle when he spun down. As we take a look at the replay here, top of your screen on the 3-wide TV multicam, seems like he just got loose towards the outside wall. I don't know about you, James. Something about that screams mechanical failure. Like that seems like a genuine mechanical failure.
Yes, that's odd. That's not a crash we normally see here. Now we've seen a couple drivers get loose coming out on that start-finish line straight, but there was did he get a bump from behind as we still have it pulled up on the 3-wide TV multicam replay?
Keep an eye on the steering wheel here. Yeah, it seems like the weight just seems like it shifted around there. I mean, he didn't turn to the right on the steering wheel. It's like the weight settled down, that spring squatted down on the right rear, and he just took off.
Yeah, that's not good, as they say. And I'm surprised. That's the third time that if I was a racer, I would have screamed caution, caution, caution. But like you said, the way Darlington picks up the racetrack, that what would be considered part of the racing service for you and I is considered part of the apron from those guys from the iRacing built-in track stand. So very interesting to see is we've had 3 close calls that really had the opportunity to interrupt some green flag runs. And Andre, again, no worries about interrupting me. I think we're gonna be doing that for the next several hours, especially as we see drivers get loose and have weird problems out of turn 4. Again, I'm confused. I'm not sure if that's maybe a setup issue that's causing some of this for some of these drivers, or mechanical, or what might have happened. But such an odd place to see any issues develop.
Yeah, and that's the second driver we've seen have issues towards the end of the straightaway. So very, very odd. And I think I have to lean towards maybe something on the setup of this car. Once the car settles down and the weight kind of transfers, it seems like these cars get a little bit unruly, especially on older tires. So that's something to keep an eye on, I suppose, and something that these drivers may have to make some pit road adjustments to try to counteract. Because right there in front of the leader, we just saw another car dart towards the outside wall. Now, he caught it. Nothing came of that one. But, yeah, these drivers are struggling. There we go right there. It's happening with the number, is that the 55, I believe? The 65, Sean O'Brien Jr. Something's going on these straightaways, James. Maybe dust or oil on the track?
I know our viewers can't see me at home, but my hands are in the air with the OY motion because I've never seen anything like it. Normally, it's the corners that oval racers really have problems with. Today, it's the straightaway that is absolutely eating them up and spitting them out. So I don't know, man. This is a first for me. That's a lot of high horsepower and everybody trying to put it down as quickly as they can. But this is quite the night so far. This is the most crashes I've ever seen without a caution. I'll say that for sure.
Absolutely, I'd have to agree there. But I'm not sure if we got it on the broadcast or not, but we did have a moment with Jonathan Delaney. Lap cars got in the wall in front of him. He had to check up big time about a lap and a half ago. So that's why he went from about 4.5 seconds back from Hickson-Bod back to 7.7. So that was a bit of a close call, although not really too damaging. I mean, there's only a few laps left in this stage, and I don't think he was going to make up those 4 seconds in just a handful of laps anyhow. So luckily he didn't get any damage. He got woed up in time. He didn't make contact with anything, so his car will be fresh and clean for this next restart. And I think a lot of this is going to be kind of decided by pit stop. I mean, if Jonathan Delaney could get a better pit stop at the end of this stage than Bryson and then make himself the control car, who knows what he could make happen. We just have to wait and see. It'd be interesting. But Cameron Stone now 24 seconds back as we close in on the end of this stage. A few more laps, I'll tell you what, third place might have gone a lap down. He's kind of saved by the bell, I would say, as Bryson is going to be rounding the corner to take one lap 115. And, of course, as per league rules, like usual, 10 cars will have to come to the stripe for the completion of lap 115, for the completion of the stage. At which point, the admins will throw a caution. Everybody's going to come down pit road, get their cars serviced if they so choose. And like James said earlier, I don't think there's any reason anybody would choose not to. It's pretty much a guaranteed thing. The whole field's going to come down pit road. The question is, who gets the better entry, who gets the better exit, who gets the better pit time? We'll have to find out, as Bryson, with an 8-second lead and nearly the entire field a lap down, is going to come out of 3 and 4. And he is going to get the first stage win of the 2021 playoffs for the 100% Cup Series here at Darlington. And there goes the caution a little bit earlier than expected. Usually they wait for 10 cars to cross, so I almost wonder if something else didn't happen somewhere on the track, perhaps.
Didn't see anything either. We saw a couple close calls. I know the number 67 almost went for a wild ride as well as Bryson came around. That was Josh Ward who had a bit of a moment. Ward went down on the apron and he was able to hold on to it. Now we've had somebody out in the grandstands as well cheering us on, and mostly he's here for Carlos, the world famous producer, but he asked, are there any fast repairs here for the 100% Cup Series? That's Joseph Penn, who provides race control for a bunch of different stuff. There are no fast repairs here at the 100% Cup Series. So again, full-length races. If you find yourself with a wadded-up race car, you either pack it up to the hauler and focus on next week, or you get the pit crew out there with a bunch of hammers, duct tape, and Flex Seal to try and get it pointing in the right direction and salvage some points. But it is a one-and-done type deal for the 100% Cup Series. If you crash, you crash. That is it. There's no get-out-of-jail-free cards here.
No get-out-of-jail-free cards indeed, as everybody's making their way down pit road. You can see Cameron Stone in the DNQ podcast car. And then Bryson sliding into his pit stall, didn't miss it, and Jonathan Delaney pulling in just ahead of him. Now, of course, Jonathan overshoots his pit stall. I'd like to say I'm surprised, but then again, it is Jonathan Delaney, so that's going to kind of hinder his chances of beating the 63 out of pit road. Here he comes as the 57's going to slot in there in second.
Did Hicksonball blow his pit stall? He's in his pit lane for 26 seconds.
I'm not entirely sure. That was a strange situation, but he did beat Jonathan Delaney out of pit road.
Yeah.
So,
Hicksonball was in there for 26 seconds. Delaney was in there for 24.3. So I'm not sure if maybe our race leaders had a little bit of micro damage. Something might have happened. Maybe making some adjustments on the car. That's an odd one, Andre.
It could have been damage. I mean, when you're navigating lap traffic like that, I think sometimes it's almost inevitable that you're going to put the bumper to one of them every now and again. And so maybe some front end damage, maybe some radiator damage, or possibly just some adjustments they made that took some time. But that is strange. I mean, 22 seconds for Delaney and 26 seconds for Bryson. I mean, that's well beyond our usual pit times. I mean, what do we normally have? What is it, 14 seconds or so, James?
Normally it's like 14.5 for an average pit stall. But look at this. I mean, Hicksonball's in his pit for 26 seconds. Delaney in there for 24.3. Cameron Stone for 23.8. So I'm very confused here.
Yeah, I'm a little baffled as well. That's very strange. Well, I'll tell you what. Let me see if I can bring in Bryson real quick and try to get a quick word in with our stage winner. We can ask him ourselves. Bryson, we're going to try to keep it brief. You got a copy?
Yeah, I got you.
So you and John both had pretty long pit stops there. What was the cause of that?
I had 10 seconds of damage to repair from hitting the wall earlier in the stage. I assume John had the same.
Interesting. Bryson, you're putting on a clinic out there. You lapped up to third. My only question is, where'd you buy the rocket boosters?
Bought it at pay-to-win setups this week.
Okay. So not even on the Nexus sets. You just went to pay to win, and that seems to be the car that's carrying you through, huh?
Yep. I tried a bunch of different setups this week. They're all pretty similar, but this one had the best handling after about 30 laps, so it's running good.
All right. Well, we're going to put you back in your team chat. Good luck with the rest of the race, Bryson.
Thanks, guys.
And that was Bryson Hicksonball out of the booth. He's going to be going green very shortly. So that answers that, James. A little bit of damage. That's pretty interesting because, I mean, I think on both of our ends, your screen and my screen, James, those cars looked pristine. I would never have guessed they had 10 seconds of damage.
The way that iRacing works sometimes, you can tap that wall 20 laps in a row, and sometimes the 21st lap, you tap it the exact same way. iRacing starts to show the damage and says something going on. So here's what I'm curious to see, Andre. We've got Bryson, who's been the dominant car all night long. Can Delaney maybe put some pressure on early on and see if he can set the pace? and maybe get Bryson a little bit out of his groove here, as well as Cameron Stone, Jason Taylor now on the lead lap. So here we go, and immediately Bryson gets a fantastic launch. Let's see if Delaney can stay in tow as it is Hicksonball, Delaney, Stone, Taylor, Hall, your top 5. Only 4 drivers on the lead lap here right now, so man, I'm not sure what's going to happen, but I don't think I've seen a night quite like tonight so far.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've seen a race go down like this, but I'll tell you one thing that I'm pretty certain of, James. I think there's a lot more urgency behind the wheel of the number 9, because going into this race, it was a question mark. I'm sure John felt pretty confident, getting the pole and then setting the fastest lap at that juncture. I bet you he thought, man, I have the car. I'm going to walk away with this one. Now he knows that if he lets that 63 get away from him, there's no catching back up. There is no reeling that 63 back in. So if he wants to make something happen, he's got to do it soon. He's got to do it early in this run, and he can't let Bryson get to that long run out front, because as Bryson said himself, that setup feels really good after the first 30 laps or so, whereas everybody else seems to fade away. So there's a lot of urgency, I think, for that number 9 to strike as quickly as he can.
I agree. If he can, if Hicksonball gets out front and gets in that same groove that he's been able to get into, I think the whole field's going to be in trouble here. Looks like now Delaney and Stone are going to at least keep Hicksonball in his sights and maybe use the draft on number 63 machine to pull the number 9 car back up towards the front. Because I think they've got to at least put some pressure on almost immediately to try and shake up the race results here. Hicksonball, when he's left to his own devices out front, he's able to hot lap like nobody's business. And I don't know. I mean, Delaney, he's about 0.3 seconds back right now. I'm not sure if or when we're going to see a move from Delaney, or if he's just going to try and stay glued to the bumper of Hicksonball for as long as he can and see what Hicksonball is doing out here to carry so much speed so consistently. That's allowed him to pretty much put a gap on the entire field, and really a dominant effort that opening stage run.
And Bryson, he's a rare breed. I've always said, whenever I'm in a race, whether it's RC cars or on a racing simulator or even just in a video game, I've always preferred to be the tail. I've always preferred to be the car following the leader, because I feel like there's a lot of knowledge that I can gain. There's a lot of information that I can get from them. And also, they act as a good reference point. If they break into a corner, I know I can break 10 feet later. I can go just a little bit deeper. I get out front and I lose my reference point, and suddenly I find it a lot harder to navigate the track that I was just turning laps around. Bryson, and I've talked about this with him numerous times, especially back when we used to race in an old NASCAR Heat League back on the video game consoles. He always said he likes to be the lead car. He doesn't want to be the car behind. He wants to be up front because that's where he's comfortable, and that's when he turns his fastest laps. So that kind of rare attribute makes him an absolute threat, I believe, in a situation like this where he's got clean track ahead of him, and all Jonathan can do is watch him sail off into the sunset.
Yeah, that's interesting, because, I mean, I've always found it easier to be the one chasing the carrot instead of the one out front having to hot lap. So well done to Hicksonball for being in that position where he can go out there, check out, and just put down some very fast lap times. That is exponentially tougher to run that type of pace versus chasing someone else and seeing what they're doing and emulating that. That shows how much Hicksonball has developed as a driver over his years of sim racing experience, because that is not an easy feat to have out there.
Yeah, it's definitely a rarer attribute, and you combine that with just the sheer consistency that he has. I mean, back in the old NASCAR Heat League, I'm going back to it again, but, before Bryson joined, in those days, I felt like I was the guy that had the car week in and week out, and then Bryson shows up. And suddenly I realized that, whereas before I was allowed to make a mistake every 15 or 20 laps, if Bryson's in the race, you're not allowed to make those mistakes anymore. You make that mistake, and it's going to set you back a certain deficit that you may never make up, because he just doesn't make those mistakes. The consistency is so incredibly painful if you're the competition to try and deal with it and to try and match. It's almost absurd the amount of consistency you can have. And, speaking of consistency, I want to look a little bit further back through the field to the driver that we have lovingly called Kevin Consistency Steele. That is a driver who, not a big fan of Darlington. And he has said as much going into this race. He's got a lot of good reasons for that. Kevin Steele has had some let's say, less than ideal experiences at this track, getting caught up in some other drivers' incidents and having issues that just seem to be out of the blue and very luck-based, out of his hands. So he does not like Darlington, and despite that, I would say this is the second or third time this year that Kevin Steele has told me going into a race, I hate this track, I'm not confident, and then he goes out and he does really well. He's running in the top 10, P6 currently, and his lap times are pretty comparable to the car ahead. So running inside the top 10, making sure that that consistency is turned on for the playoffs, seems like that number 24 is putting himself in good position.
With such a talented field, being able to be in a top 10, a top 15, and a regular race, a top 20, really is an accomplishment among all of these competitors, as the field is so stacked and talented. All these guys extremely familiar with iRacing, sim racing, years and years of experience and thousands of hours of combined experience as well, allowing you to come out here when you're surrounded by that many like-minded and talented individuals. Being able to run the pace, that top 5, that top 10 is really and truly an accomplishment. I think it's what people at home kind of forget. You're not out there battling with computer-generated components. These are real people across the world that put in real man hours throughout the week just to show up to this one race a week to put down their best lap times they possibly can and put on the best showing they possibly can. So there's a lot of work that goes into it, and that's allowing guys such as Dustin Hall, Kevin Steele running 5th and 6th to be proud of what they're doing out there, even if it is a not favored track for someone such as Kevin Steele. He's put on a really good showing so far, and he's only down 1 spot from where he started. So for a track that he doesn't really enjoy that much, that's a pretty darn good run if you ask me.
Absolutely. Now we do have some Preston McRae fans in the chat. We have somebody saying go 53, so I do want to take a moment to take a look at the number 53 and how he's doing so far tonight. Now, of course, Preston is a playoff driver, and he's currently running 11th, 3 laps down. He is just outside of that top 10, but he's currently running ahead of some other playoff drivers, and that's what's important. He's currently running ahead of Cody Bird, RJ Root, Damaris Hickenbottom, Mason Lowry, among others who were involved in incidents early on. And, you know, you don't have to win these races. You don't have to be the car that's leading every lap. You don't have to be the Bryson Hixenbaugh. You got to beat the other playoff drivers, or at least enough to keep yourself in contention. And I think Preston knows that. He's taking it easy. He's hitting his marks. He knows that right now he's okay in points. And as long as he keeps this consistency up, I think the 53 fans in chat are going to have a pretty good night.
Yeah, all these guys doing great out there. I mean, even Delaney, who's been second, kind of playing second fiddle all night, he's about 2 seconds back from Hixenbaugh, who is kind of getting out there in his groove. But Cameron Stone as well, he's keeping Jonathan Delaney in his sights as well. So the number 57 of Stone and number 9 of Delaney about a half second apart now. And that last stage is pretty stretched out, first, second, and third, but even these guys are starting to bunch up. Kevin Steele, Dustin Hall, that's the battle for 5th on track. All these guys doing a good job. We're seeing drivers stay a little bit closer in this second run than we did in the first, and I'm going to be interested to see on what lap we start seeing some shenanigans again, as we saw a few big incidents in the opening round of the stage, but I don't know. It's good green flag racing all the way through, and these guys are showing why they're some of the best in the business. Again, nobody wants to race with a crash fest filled 100% series, and that's what attracts some drivers to the series. I mean, it takes, again, real work and real time to put in the effort, and I think that's kind of the common theme here among all these drivers from 1st to 20th. Everybody's put in the effort to come out here and run strong. Even the guys that are having a rough night, just still faster than the average guy you'd find on the iRacing circuit.
Absolutely, and it looks like we might have a battle brewing for second place. I'm looking at Jonathan Delaney and Cameron Stone. They're only about half a second apart at any given time, and of course that gap does fluctuate a little bit going in and out of the corners. The drivers are fast at different sections of the track, but overall it evens out to about half a second between them. And I gotta wonder if that is the result of Cameron Stone figuring something out, or maybe Delaney going the wrong way on some adjustments. But either way, it seems like the 57 is a lot closer in pace than in that first run. And I'd have to say I'm leaning towards, I think Cameron Stone made some pit stop adjustments. He's changed that car in some way. And whatever he did, it's working out, because he's not letting Bryson get out to that massive lead that he had before. He's not letting the number 9 walk away either. He's pretty much keeping pace with him and putting himself in position that if, the number 9 is held up by lap traffic, if anything were to happen, if he scraped the wall, if he was slowed down for any particular reason, then Cameron Stone's going to be there to, to strike. And Cam, I talked to him. Of course, I talked to him. We're on a podcast together. That's the sponsor of his car. But, talking to him going into the playoffs, he himself is a little frustrated. Not in his own performance, but he feels like the league's kind of forgot about him. He feels like, he's the defending champ, but he's not in the conversation. Whenever people talk about who they think's going to win the next week or who's going to be the champion this year, it seems like he thinks a lot of drivers just aren't mentioning him when maybe he feels they should. And he told me coming into the playoffs, he's going to remind everybody that he's still here, that he is the defending champion, and that he is every bit as good as he was last year. So driving with a bit of a chip on his shoulder, I'm sure, but that chip on his shoulder is giving him some motivation, and it's giving him a lot of speed as he continues to run in the top 3 tonight.
He's out there driving strong. He's only down 1 spot from where he started tonight. And I guess that's one of those things that kind of bites racers, real life or sim racers alike. You're only as good as your last race. So if you're not consistently up in the mix and maybe either winning or podium contention or making the highlight reel one way or the other, in a field of 20 to 40 drivers that we see week in and week out for the 100% Cup Series, you're right, it is a little bit easy to get lost in the sauce, but he's showing everyone at home as well in the booth, like, hey, or on track, I should say, more importantly, like, I deserve to be up here. I am a consistent front runner, as he is, again, up there charging hard. It's only 4 drivers in the lead lap, and he's one of them. And I've also got to pay accolades to Jason Taylor, number 37 driver, who is up 22 positions here today, running 4th. So Taylor doing a great job up in the mix. And again, for all of our fans at home, if you look at the left side of your screen or at the top, if you see drivers with red shading over their name, that is signifying that they are in the chase playoff. And out of the top 10 drivers, it is 9 out of 10 that are in the chase and charging hard. So all these guys really putting on a great showing and running very strong all season long as well into the chase, which makes this so kind of close throughout the year.
Absolutely. And just a quick update for McRae Nation in the chat. Preston just cracked the top 10 not long ago. He got around the 11th place car, put himself inside the top 10. So that 53 continuing to work his way through the field and continuing to have a pretty good night. Now he is 1 lap behind Alex Princeton in the number 19. Alex Princeton kind of in no man's land right now, not really close enough to strike on Pearson. Of course, he has a 1 lap advantage over McRae. So I would say Princeton's one of the many drivers in this race that are just afforded the ability to click off laps, try to hit your marks. There's really not much urgency for a lot of these guys. Although one thing I'm noticing now, James, we talked about how Stone seemed to have found something, but now that car looks to be falling off. He's now 0.8 of a second behind Jonathan Delaney. That gap is starting to grow. Do you think Stone sacrificed some long run speed for the short run, and now that we're staying green for so long, maybe that's coming back to bite him?
Very well could be. We know some of the drivers were set up very, very loose. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Andre. Wasn't Stone one of the guys that had problems early on in the first stage as that number 57 machine? He had a bad start, and then he got loose a couple times, I believe, coming out of 4 and was able to hold on to it. So he might be chasing a setup issue. And with these open setups, these drivers, if they have a setup that they're not happy with, for example, a car that is too loose, you can come into pit lane, and racers tend to overcorrect sometimes. So make a few adjustments, change some tire pressures, the next thing you know, your car is a little bit tighter after a pit stop that you may run into. So always something these guys are chasing one way or the other. I think it's very rare that a racer is super happy with a setup to a 100% all the way to the end. And they always want, or a lot of racers, I should say, always trying to make a little bit of adjustments throughout the run. So I'm wondering if Stone maybe adjusted something on the number 57 Ford Mustang and maybe didn't quite get it as close as he wanted to here today.
That is a stern possibility. And, another thing on my mind, James, is, how is the changing track condition going to affect these guys? I mean, who set their car up for later into the race? I mean, the sun is going down, and you can see there's so much more shade all over the track because the sun is starting to fall behind the horizon, behind the grandstands. And at this point, the temps are going to start to go down. They're going to continue to go down. I mean, when you're a driver and you have a race that is starting in the daylight, ending at night, you've got a choice to make. And you can set that car up to be fast during the day. You can set that car up to be fast at night. And it's just kind of where you feel you need to have that speed. Now, I think a lot of drivers would opt to make the car faster at night because that's the end of the race. And, the old saying goes, you could lead every single lap, but there's only one that counts, and that's the last lap. So I got to wonder if maybe some of these drivers like Jonathan Delaney, Cameron Stone, maybe their cars start to come to life as the sun goes down. Whereas Bryson, I mean, he has so much speed. It's very rare to see a car that fast during the day keep its speed once the sun goes down. So I'm curious to see how this dynamic shifts.
And 3 should get a little bit more power. You should be able to put down a little bit more grip as well. So I'm not quite sure how that's going to affect our drivers here today, and especially we've only got 4 drivers on the lead lap. Now, if we just keep clicking off just like this, we have no more cautions, and then just the stage break, that'll allow 1 more driver onto the lead lap. So I don't know. This might very quickly become just a 4-car race, or maybe a 5-car with the next stage coming. But I'm very surprised that I don't want to say the lack of attendees that may be in at the end, but not as many cars in that top positions on the lead lap that I was expecting to really throw a wrench in things as the night goes on. Now, that being said, we've had a lot of lap cars that may throw a wrench in things by accident. So we've seen, I think it was 3 big, we'll call them almost crashes. There we go. Cameron Stone, he gets into somebody. I don't quite know who that was. I think that was the number 47.
I believe that was Drumhiller in the 44. He got a little bit tight in the corner, smacked the wall, came down. I'm not sure there was any contact with the 57. I think he might have been spared the net code there just barely, but that was perfect timing, James. You're talking about the lap traffic making things interesting, and there it is.
Yeah, I mean, Cameron Stone, I don't know. I was looking at it from my screen here in the booth, and oh yeah, I think they made a little contact there, just ever so slightly. So as far as contact goes at 150 miles an hour side by side on a difficult track, couldn't have went much worse than that. But yeah, I mean, we were just saying in the booth that it just takes 1 lap car to throw a wrench in things, as we almost saw it. And I don't think guys like Hicksonball want a caution at this point. He wants to stay out front, put his head down, and just click off good laps, because last time Hicksonball came around the start-finish line, he clicked off at 30.76, the exact same as Delaney. Meanwhile, Cameron Stone clicked off at 30.94, but he did have that lap traffic to contend with. So these guys out front, your top 4 drivers that are on the lead lap, are just sitting there dropping laps and really not having any issues here today. Just happy to get through this without too many incidents.
And you know, another question on my mind as they continue to run down this green flag stint, does anybody change up their pit strategy from the first stage drastically? I mean, did they learn something or another? Is there something that, you know, they regret about, you know, did I stay out too long? Did I come in too early? You know, what are these guys figuring out that might play into them changing their strategy? Because we saw pretty much everybody pit within, I would say, a 3 or 4 lap range of one another. Nobody really came in drastically early, and nobody, with the exception of Jason S. Taylor, really stretched their fuel incredibly far. So do you think we're going to see them play it safe again like that, or do you think some of these drivers are going to throw the wrench at the wall and see what happens?
I think the drivers that are outside the top 4, top 5, or at least the drivers not in the lead lap especially, are going to do anything they can at this point to try and make something happen, to try and get on that lead lap and then put themselves back into contention. Looking at live time and scoring, there's not a lot of drivers besides your top 3 that are in the high 30-second lap times. Most of the field is clicking off mid-31s, low 32s. So the pace isn't there for a lot of the guys. We've still got only 16 drivers that are still out on track, it appears. So a lot of drivers from 17th place back. It looks like Higginbottom has retired tonight. Do you see that as well on your screen, Andre?
It does indeed look like he's out of the event, which is, oh man, that is not good news. I mean, technically, a lot of the playoff drivers he was ahead of are also out of the event, so they're not going to come back and they're not going to get those laps back and finish ahead of him. And Benefield didn't even start the race. So right now, that shouldn't change too much in his point situation, but if one of those drivers were to get back in their car somehow and get out and turn some laps, that could be disastrous. And also in getting out of the car, he's kind of sacrificing any additional points he might have gained. I mean, if we have any more cars wreck out of the race and he's still on the track, well, it doesn't necessarily matter how slow he is or how off pace he is. He's still going to get around them and claim those points. So I'm not sure what played into that decision. Maybe too much damage. I mean, we saw Damaris was really far off the pace. By the time he had taken it behind the wall, I think he had fallen something like 8 laps down there, James. So if you're that far off pace, you know, I mentioned how frustrating it can be to drive a car that doesn't handle right, that doesn't have enough speed, and how aggravating that can be. Maybe that car just got to be too much for him.
Yeah, I think the word I caught on to immediately when you were describing that was frustrating. These drivers, they know they're in for a long night. I mean, these races can stretch out to 3 hours, especially if there's a couple of cautions in play. And I mean, if you're finding yourself just not having fun, because at the end of the day, I mean, yes, everybody wants to win well. They want to win the chase. But if you're just absolutely miserable in your cockpit for 2 to 3 hours, there's better ways to spend your life. So that's maybe what we see Higginbottom doing. He's going to go, I don't know, he might go cut the grass at 3 o'clock in the morning. I don't know. But deciding, hey, there's something better I would like to be doing than really struggling with a race car right now. So we might have to talk to him before next week and see what the decision was to retire early. And I do agree with you. I mean, from a racer's point of view and a championship point of view, every lap you can stay out there, it increases your chances of bettering your points payout for the race. It might not pay off. It might be green all the way to the end and nobody has any problems, but there's always the chance that somebody has a night worse than yours and you can score a couple of more positions. And then if you do find yourself a little bit close later in that chase, that one night where you stuck in there can pay off dividends if it works out in your favor. Or you can run all night and you find that it didn't do anything but just burn more gasoline. So tough call to make for the guys out there today.
Yeah, definitely a tough call indeed. And I think 3 a.m. grass mowing may be in violation of some local noise ordinances, but I'm not entirely sure. We'll have to ask him if that's what he decides to go out and do after retiring from this event. But yeah, just not the points night that I think he wanted to have, especially now that Cody Bird has gotten out ahead of him. Preston McRae also having a really good points day. He was close to Damaris in points. It's just going to kind of put the pressure on for the coming weeks for Damaris. I mean, he's going to have to show up. He's going to have some really good points days, maybe even grab a win, because unfortunately that incident early on tonight was a huge setback. And I give him credit. I think he definitely gave it a shot. He tried to keep that car on track. But ultimately, it seemed like it was just down on horsepower, and he finally decided enough was enough, as so happens sometimes. But the leader working his way around a little bit more lap traffic. That appears to be a Bill Elliott throwback scheme. Very nice paint scheme that he just overtook there. But we're seeing a very similar, I would say, not strategy, but we're seeing this play out very similar to the first stage. I mean, Bryson getting out to a lead. He's now got 4 seconds over Delaney. He's got 7 seconds over Stone. So Stone, he's figuring something out. He's a little bit quicker now, but still not quite there with the 63. Jason S. Taylor, he's making a valiant effort at it. He's not gone a lap down yet. He is 17 seconds back, but he is falling back lap after lap. Really, I think if anybody's going to do anything with Hixenbaugh, if anybody's going to get around him, they're going to have to do it on strategy. I'm not sure anybody's going to be able to do it on speed. But the thing is, when we're staying green so much, it kind of strong arms your strategy, wouldn't you say? I mean, when you're staying green, it's not about, well, I could take tires this stop or I could not. It's you have to take tires. And it's not, oh, I could take a splash of gas. It's you have to take gas. So really the only option you have when you're staying green this long is when do you pit? And there comes a point where, Delaney's 4 seconds back. It doesn't matter how big of a short stop he pulls or how big of an undercut he grabs. I don't think you're going to make that 4-second deficit up. So for a lot of these drivers, I think they're kind of hoping that maybe this race gets a little bit more chaotic and gives them some restarts to work with. Whoa, as we have issues with Randy Drumhiller into the outside wall, sliding down in front of Preston McRae. Now back up the track, and there is our first caution for cause.
Oh boy, it finally happened, Andre. I mean, we've been waiting for it for 3 or 4 laps now, or not 3 or 4 laps, 3 or 4 almost crashes, but it finally comes out for Drumhiller as the celebration kazoos sound in the background as we get ready to look at the instant replay here to see what brought out the very first caution. As here we go with the 3-wide TV instant replay. Ooh, he got punterino'd.
Yeah, that was the old punterino. It looks like he got a shove down into the inside. Ooh, and then he noses it into the inside wall. That's never good. That's not a place you want to get any damage. Taking another look at it, we're riding on board with Drumhiller. He got into the outside wall. That caused some loss of momentum, which then increased the closing rate with the car behind. I mean, honestly, he did get punted, but you can't blame the car behind him. I don't think that 86 had anywhere to go.
Yeah, Brandon White. Yeah, I mean, he was running the exact same pace. The next thing you know, The number 44 machine of Drumhiller just boops that outside wall, and White has nowhere to go and just gets into the rear bumper very, very hard, and that's going to be a big hit, and that may shake up the strategy a little bit. That was the exact same thing that happened last year as well. So look at this. We've got everybody except Jason Taylor who's coming in. Excuse me, Jason Taylor stays out while everybody else comes in. Delaney, Stone, Hicksonbaugh. I'm curious to see if Steele is going to stay out as well, as now he's the lucky dog getting his way back on the lead lap.
Quite the interesting play. I'm not sure if maybe Jason Taylor just wanted a point for leading a lap, and now he's going to come down pit road. I mean, they're on over 50 lap old tires. I can't imagine that he's actually going to stay on those tires, right? I mean, he would have stayed on the lead lap either way. It's not like he had to take the wave around.
Yeah, I think you're right. You're right. Everybody's got tires here, so now everybody else is going to come in, I believe.
Yeah, he's coming down pit road. I think he just wanted that point for leading the lap, which smart play. I mean, we're in the playoffs. Ooh, 86 car got awful close to those sand barrels. That was a close call. But also another update for the Preston McRae fans. I'm sure that replay was a little unsettling as he nearly got into it. But I've been looking at his car, and he might have a little bit of front end damage from that, maybe a few seconds, but nothing race ending. And I'll tell you what, I don't think anybody could have had a closer call than Preston McRae. I mean, you saw he was right up against both cars that were involved in that incident, and he was able to somehow drive away. But another restart and another opportunity for Jonathan Delaney to try to get a better restart here. But we do have somebody in the infield care center, so I'm going to go ahead and drag up our driver. Damaris Hickenbottom, you got a copy?
Yes, sir.
Well, Damaris, you got involved in that incident with Robert Miller early on. Looked like you were going to be able to keep the car out on the track, although it was severely wounded. You were able to get yourself in front of a few of the other playoff drivers who had DNF'd and taken it behind the wall. But still, this is probably not the way you were wanting to start your playoffs. What happened out there?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the question is what didn't happen, Andre. Pretty much everything happened to us, man. We're doing pretty good. We're running up in, I think, 11th or so when the incident with Robert happened. Just caught some lap traffic, and guess he was in a hurry to get around us, and kind of bad things happened, wrong place, wrong time. And that last incident, I got into Drumhiller and tore the car up. Can't repair it, so we're done for the night. But yeah, it's definitely not the way we wanted to end the night. We did a lot better last year here, and I guess we'll just have to look forward and get to, I think, Richmond up next.
And you know, you mentioned Richmond. Obviously, tonight is going to put you in a little bit more of a box when it comes to points. How do you feel about Richmond? Is that a track you're comfortable with? You think you're going to be able to go out there and knock it out of the park?
my answer before this race would have been yeah, but I thought I was pretty good coming in here, so I don't know, man. We'll see. I usually do pretty good at Richmond the last two times we went there in the 100 Cup, so hopefully we can do good there. I'm going to need a good night for sure.
Well, again, the good news for you is that there's been a lot of playoff drivers tonight that have had just as bad, if not worse, nights in terms of points than you. So it kind of keeps you afloat. But James, you got anything for Damaris?
I mean, Damaris, again, this is a rough night for you. How do you think this is going to affect your possible Chase Championship going further? I know it's not the night you want. It's going to put you a few laps down, but what do you expect in the next couple rounds?
Well, kind of what Andre was talking about in this race, man. I mean, James just gonna hope for some bad luck with some other guys. We definitely need some help now. But we got 2 races to do it. We got some guys that are gonna miss some races coming up, some of the playoff drivers, and only got to beat 4 of them. So just hope 4 of those guys have worse days than I do the next couple races.
Well, thank you, Damaris, for your time. I greatly appreciate you, man. Sorry about the bad luck tonight.
Yeah, no problem, guys. Thank you.
That was a disappointed Damaris out of the booth. And yeah, again, you can't blame him for being disappointed. I know how much practice he put in for tonight, and how hard he was really trying. As now we have a battle for the lead. Here goes Jonathan Delaney down low, and man, past Bryson like he was standing still. What a power move out of that 9.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if Delaney's going to be able to maybe set the pace that was kind of dominated by Hicksonbaugh early, really the entire race leading up to that very first caution, coming out very late into the race. As Delaney's last time by was a 28.66, about 0.3 of a second faster than Hixenbaugh. But now it's kind of in a first-time position for both of these drivers. Can Delaney set the pace, or is he going to fall victim to Hixenbaugh, who's been an absolute machine here today, able to run laps? And that was actually the fastest lap of the race by Delaney with a 28.66. As it looks like Hixenbaugh has a little bit of internet problems. Number 63 driver blinks out hard a couple times. And that might give Delaney the chance he needs to break the draft just ever so slightly and put himself in a good position to put on a dominant run. But right now it's Delaney, Hixenbaugh, Stone, Taylor, Steele. Your top 5 all on the lead lap here at Darlington as things are getting shaken up a little bit as tonight progresses.
And those internet issues out of Bryson are definitely not what the driver of that 63 wanted to see. He's had reoccurring internet issues the last few weeks, more than he ever really had before. He's been in contact with his internet service provider. He's also been doing some research into some routers and modems to try and figure out what's going on. But if this continues, that could be disastrous. I mean, we've talked about it before, James, where, really the common etiquette, if you blink out bad enough to make sure that you're not a threat to any of the other drivers' possible, running position, is to just kind of fall back, get down on the apron, let off the throttle, let everybody go. That way, when you reappear, you're not in front of the whole field or reappearing inside of another car. So if those internet issues persist, that might be what Bryson finds himself having to do. Luckily, it seems to have stabled out. He has not blinked for a couple laps now, and he's closing the gap back to Jonathan Delaney. So John's got the clean air, but he's not quite able to run away with it as he gets a little bit squirrely out of the corner. I thought maybe John's car was coming to life with the sun going down and the sun starting to set, but no, he's not running away with it easy. Bryson really pressuring hard.
Bryson trying to pressure as best as he can, but that internet problem is going to cause him a little bit of issues. I mean, at one point, he was right on the rear bumper of Delaney. Delaney has got to keep an eye out because he's going to be nervous as well. He knows Bryson is coming, but he also knows Bryson has those internet problems as well. So the last thing any of these drivers, and really on the top 2, the top 5, want to see an incident happen because of somebody's internet connection. So I think what we're going to see here is Bryson maybe check up for a second, put a couple of car links between himself and Delaney on purpose and not push too hard, as he does not want to ruin anybody's night, as these guys have been putting in so much work all night. I mean, you heard the disappointment from Damaris, who is one of those drivers that had a call his night early. I mean, these guys put in so much work to make it this far in the race. They want to end it on their own terms and not through either a crash caused by internet problems or race control telling these drivers to get out of the way as they are deemed unfit to race. But I'm not going to say it looks better now, because every time we do that, it seems to get worse. But for the time being, Delaney is doing a fantastic job out front, keeping about 0.3 of a second gap over Hixenbaugh. The sun's setting, and I think the lap times may get a little bit faster here with a cooler track as well.
Yeah, the track is definitely speeding up. I mean, you mentioned it a few laps ago. Jonathan Delaney set the fastest lap of the race, down into the 28-second bracket. So that's pretty quick for Darlington. It seems like things are just getting faster. As we go to our 3-wide TV multicam, top of your screen, that's Dustin Hall battling it out with Sean O'Brien Jr. Now, that is for position. These two drivers are the only 2 1 lap down. Behind them, you've got Brandon Pierce and Preston McRae, who are 2 and 3 laps down, respectively. And on the bottom of your screen, that is leader Jonathan Delaney, who is out to 0.2 of a second lead. And I say that as if that's much of a gap, but man, it's really not. It is a battle that he is locked into with the number 63. And, I said it before, James, but there's one driver that it's frustrating to battle with. It's always Hixenbaugh, just because of how painfully consistent he is when it comes to hitting his marks. You could have 30 or 40 perfect laps in a row, but that 41st lap where you finally make a little bit of a bobble, well, he's going to close in because he's not making that mistake. And it can be very intimidating and frustrating to deal with. But Jonathan doing a great job, keeping a cool head, keeping his head on his shoulders, and just hitting his marks. I think at that point, as a driver, you just want to you want to stop looking at your mirror. Don't look at what he's doing. Don't look at how deep he's driving into the corner, because at the end of the day, it's his responsibility to pass you cleanly, and it's your responsibility to hit your marks and go as fast as you possibly can. As long as you're not swerving up and down and throwing crazy blocks, quit looking at the mirror, hit your marks, do what you can to keep the lead, because sometimes looking at that mirror can psych you out.
Especially when you have somebody such as Hixenbaugh right behind you. We saw him get right on the rear bumper of the number 9 machine of Delaney, your race leader. That can get a little bit intimidating, but on the other hand, you also know you have guys around you can trust. Delaney, Hicksonbaugh, Stone, Taylor, Steele. These are all guys that are extremely good at what they do as they run in a pack here together. Well, excuse me, it's the top 4 running in a single file here. These are guys that you know you can kind of get away with a little bit more. You can drive hard and they will treat you with respect. These guys are all very talented. You don't just get up in the top 4 by accident. So you're able to really trust the guys around you. They're not going to push too aggressively and make any bonsai moves that can risk yourself or the other driver. So that's one of the good things about kind of being in your own version of Top Split every week is a lot of really good talented drivers that are going to race clean. As here comes Hicksonbaugh on the inside of Delaney. He's going to try and make a move. Delaney able to carry a little bit more speed around the outside. And Hicksonbaugh gets back into the groove, but we're starting to see some moves here for the lead.
Yeah, that was kind of a almost desperate looking move out of the 63. He drove it down low, and we mentioned how little grip there is down there. We saw the 63 slide right up the outside wall, and he had to get out of the throttle. He's going to try it again, though. Here he goes back down to the bottom, going into turn 1. How deep does he drive it in? Well, he's going to put 2 tires on the apron, 2 tires on the track, and that's kind of a sketchy thing right there. I think you know as well as I do, James. When you have 2 tires on the racing surface and 2 tires on the apron, that difference in grip just completely unsettles the car. It's so easy to get sideways in that situation. But Bryson doing a phenomenal job keeping the car pointed in the right direction. And all of this battling in the meantime is allowing Cameron Stone in that 57 to, not only keep pace with him, but actually close the gap a little bit. It's really become a bit of a 3-car battle, as when they go through 1 and 2, Cameron Stone is able to close the gap, get right up on the bumper, and 3 and 4 is where he falls back a little bit. But it seems like every run we have, the 57 finds a little extra something. So who knows what he's going to be able to do by the end of the night. And, of course, he's not the only car on the lead lap. We've got Jason Taylor. And he's trying to make himself a part of this battle, as he is not too far behind Cameron Stone. So, really, we've got 4 cars under a blanket, and this is probably the most fierce the competition has been all night.
Hicksonbaugh was able to get out front, check out, and kind of leave everybody in his tracks. But now he's got to actually contend with passing. And once he has those internet problems as well, it makes things a little bit more exciting for the drivers out on track as we're watching number 9, Delaney, able to hold on to it. And that's forcing Hicksonbaugh in a position he hasn't been in this so far tonight, is having to be the one that tries to look for a line through. Pretty much all night for Hicksonbaugh, he's had cars to deal with that weren't on the same pace as him as he was blitzing through traffic. But tonight, he's got some fast guys right in front and right behind him. So that's maybe putting him outside of his comfort zone a little bit. Number 63 machine of Hicksonbaugh. We saw him try to make that move with 2 tires on the apron, just looking for a different spot. Now, one of the benefits that Hicksonbaugh does have here is he's able to collect more data for the end of the race. If he finds himself in this situation again, that he knows where he can try and make some moves at and try and squeeze through. But if I was a betting man, I would say Hicksonbaugh wants to be back out front where he's been shining all night long and he did not having to deal with the likes of Delaney or Stone.
I would agree. I think, again, he likes to be out front. He doesn't like to be that following car. He wants to be in the clean air, wants to be able to set the pace and run the race the way he wants to. And, of course, when you're following somebody else, you kind of got to run their race. They set the pace. They choose which lanes get blocked or opened up. And you're kind of playing their game as long as you're behind them. So it can be very frustrating for a driver like Hicksonbaugh who, as we said, he's told me before, he likes to be out front. He doesn't like to be that follow car. So it's definitely a different experience than what he's had for 180 some odd laps tonight. He's been out front leading the way, and now suddenly towards the end of stage 2, he's finding himself playing a completely different game than what he was playing earlier. And to add to that, his internet issues don't seem to be going away. He's continued to blink out a few times over the last few laps, and I'm not saying that it's necessarily sportsmanlike, but I know that if I'm Cameron Stone in that 57, I'm on the driver radio, and I'm saying, Bryson, you're blinking like crazy. You got to pull over, man. You got to stop. You're blinking all over. It's kind of like when it looks like it might rain, and the guy in the lead says, "Oh, it's downpouring. It's just a monsoon over here. There's 3 drops of rain." That's what Cameron Stone's experiencing with this lag in front of him.
Now, I know we kind of joke about it. I can't imagine any of our guys in the top 5 would do that maliciously. I think Hicksonball, with the talent he has and his reputation, I think if one of the guys tell him that he's having issues, he's gonna take it to heart, and I think he'll get out of everybody's way on his own. And I'm curious to see what the top 3 guys think about it as well. If they're happy running single file for a little bit and not being able to make any passes because of Hicksonball, or if they want to race early on. I know Delaney, if I had a bet, wouldn't be too terribly upset with Hicksonball's internet issues. As Stone, I mean, the last time by, Stone was about 15 hundredths of a second slower than Hicksonball. I don't know if that's from not being able to carry the pace, or maybe finding himself not able to catch up due to the blink and not able to catch the draft as consistently as these guys out front are really putting out laps. Now they've kind of dropped Jason Taylor. He's about 3 seconds behind this 3-pack of cars. Kevin Steele, the other driver on the lead lap, he's about 11 seconds behind your race leader. And Delaney and Hicksonball just clicking it off and really making some fast lap times. The last time I was at 30.66. They are one of the few drivers still doing mid-30s this late into the run. And I think it's going to be, I'm not quite sure when we're going to be able to bring in the pit stops here once more. What do you think their next pit cycle is going to be here, Andre?
I think they might be good to the end. It would be really close, but the way that caution fell, it put them just a few laps before their standard pit cycle. I would say about 7 or 8 laps prior to when they were going to come and pit anyway. So I think a lot of these guys can probably make it to the stage end, especially with the pacing that we did. But again, I think they might have to do a little bit of conserving. Thing is, I'm not sure if anybody really is. Looking at these leaders and the pace that they're running, I mean, you mentioned they're still running mid-30s this many laps into the run. I mean, those tires are shot at this point, and they're still turning pretty competitive lap times. So I don't think too many drivers are conserving, and that tells me either they're very confident that they can make it, or they're very confident that they can't.
Yeah, either way, they're going to absolutely send it. So, yeah, Delaney, Hicksonball, Stone, Taylor, all these guys running pretty much identical lap times the entire portion of this set of the stage, and really haven't slowed down much. So I think they can make it. We've seen guys stretch out to lap, I think 64 was one of the highest runs we've seen from these competitors. So you're right, they should in theory be able to make it till the end, and if not, they're not going to lose any time trying to get into the pit stall. They're going to go as fast as they can, as quickly as they can, as Delaney is now going to have more lap traffic to contend with out on track, and he's going to start putting drivers 2 laps down here today at Darlington. I mean, the top 5 guys kind of on a different level here, and really showing everybody at home what it takes to be one of the fastest drivers at the 100% Cup Series.
Absolutely, and Darlington is one of those tracks that, as frustrating as it can be for the drivers, it's a driver's track. I mean, there is so much time to be gained or lost based purely on how you drive this track. You know, you go to a track like Atlanta, and I would say 70% of the field is running the exact same lines, and their car handles the exact same, and they can drive it in just as deep as the next guy because the car can handle it, and the track is wide enough and smooth enough, that they can kind of all stay pretty close. But at a track like Darlington, it's so tough. It is all about driver ability and car control, who can drive it in the deepest, who can get on the throttle the soonest, who knows which lines to take through the corners, and who knows how to carry the most momentum. And it seems like we're figuring out which drivers can do that, which drivers have this track figured out, like you said, on another level. And it really is one of the few tracks on the schedule where the skill ceiling is almost infinite. You know, a good driver can be good, and it just creates this big separation, this big gap. And it's not that anybody in this field, everybody in this field, like you mentioned earlier, James, from the front to the back, these are above average iRacers. These are better than your Joe Schmo you're going to find in a ranked race during the weekday. But it's just that this track itself provides such great opportunity to gain time, if you can find it, that you see this sort of separation.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. Like, again, you just said on top of the head, these are some of the best of the best, and they are still putting on a show and lapping through the entire field. In some cases, they're lapping guys twice, and it is only 5 drivers on the lead lap here. As right now, it's Delaney, Hicksonball, Stone, Taylor, and Steele. The top 5 guys are only on the only 5 guys that are on the lead lap. So these guys put on a show, and Delaney himself, he's finding a little bit of time here, and he's put about a half-second gap over Hixenbaugh, who has previously been dominating the race. So good to see Delaney out front, maybe set up for a little bit tighter racetrack as the temperature comes in, as now Delaney's going to be the guy that has the punch through traffic first here today for the first time tonight, as it has been Hixenbaugh's curse to punch through traffic first, as here comes Delaney, able to get around. I believe that's number 86, I believe. Yeah, Brandon White. I'm almost positive whose that was. So now it's Delaney's turn, who's having to dice through traffic. Hixenbaugh was able to do it pretty quickly earlier. It's going to be interesting to see if Delaney's going to be able to carry that same torch that Hixenbaugh did in the first half of the race, because we still have about 163 laps left to go here today, and these guys have got to be getting tired behind their sim rigs.
Man, I'm getting tired. I'm not even driving. It's a long event here at Darlington, and you're right. These drivers got to be getting a little exhausted as this race progresses and as the sun goes down, mentally, physically, just getting worn down lap after lap. And you mentioned how John is extending his lead, and I gotta wonder, I mentioned earlier that Bryson is now playing a different game than he's played all night long. For 180 some odd laps, Bryson was setting the pace. He was the car out front. He was the one with clean air. And that kind of gave him a lot of opportunity to try and conserve his tires, to try and, if he wanted to set a bit slower pace and be a little bit more conservative, he could do that. But now he can't let Jonathan get away from him. He cannot let that number 9 sail off into the sunset. Neither proverbially, I can't even speak, but neither realistically, proverbially, or realistically, because he, if he does that, he's gone. You lose that draft, which we talked about it a few times, but it really is an important factor to a track like Darlington. The draft is an important factor. You can't lose that. So he's had to push that car harder than he has had to all night long. He's had to make sure that he stays in the tire tracks in the number 9, and we saw a few Hail Mary attempts where he dove down to the bottom, tried to make the overtake, and that wears those tires down. It heats them up, wears them down, and as the run goes on, your car is going to get slower and slower, and I think we're starting to see the side effects of that.
Yeah, I agree. And then you're right. It's putting Hixenbaugh out of his comfort zone that he's been in all night. He's had the luxury to run out front and kind of set his own pace, hit his own marks. But when you're the second car in line trying to make moves, you do not have that luxury anymore to run at your own pace. Especially as we saw a few jabs that he took at Delaney that kind of showed us as broadcasters like he wanted to get up there. He wanted to get around him, but might have burned up those tires a little bit more than he wanted to later than he really planned to, and that's going to affect him later on the run. As I believe the stage ends on lap 230. Somebody will definitely correct me if I'm wrong, as we hear an affirmation from one of our producers here today. So, I mean, he doesn't have a whole lot of time left to try and make something happen. About 22 laps. I guess that is the good thing. If he did use up his tires, he's still going to be in good position for this stage, but he wants to get up there, get those stage points, and try and make it an overall dominant run in his car. So interesting to see how that's going to affect him in the last part of the race as well, and see if he changes up his plans any for the remainder of the race.
Absolutely. I mean, he may have to change his plans, because I think most of his plans that he had, at least prior to these last few laps, have been under the guise of being the leader. And whoa, big moment for Cameron Stone. He got very sideways out of the corner there in turn 4. We got a car smoking on pit road. That's Preston McRae, James.
Yeah, Preston, the number 53 machine, he started off about 23rd tonight, and he worked his way up to 15th, but it looks like he's going to have a very long night doing some repairs in the hauler to get ready for the future races. If that engine has let all the magic smoke out, you can pretty much count on being done for the evening, as usually that signifies at least a 20-30 minute repair, and with 200 laps on the board so far, granted he's kind of in the Hickenbottom situation where he can go back out and hope somebody else has a rough night, but that is going to be a whole lot of laps down he will find himself if he is able to return to the racetrack.
Yeah, and this, we must have missed that, because he's 20 laps down now. Last I checked in on him, he was 3 laps down. So about 17 or 18 laps ago, something must have happened. Unfortunately, that's not good news for Preston McRae Nation. But yeah, our producer is telling us something happened 9.5 minutes ago. with 53. So very unfortunate. Preston was having one heck of a night. I mean, being up there in the top 10 at a track like Darlington, that's nothing to scoff at. He had speed, was just really making the fans proud, and I'm sure they're still proud of him. Just unfortunate that the night came to an end like that.
Yeah, I mean, and another positive way to look at it, there's nobody else out on track behind him, so unless somebody magically comes back out, which I think everybody else is retired 16 through 26, he's still going to be in the top 15, so not a terrible night, and he's still ahead of couple of other playoff attendees here today. I mean, he's ahead of Hickenbottom, he's ahead of Raymond Roots, so as far as bad nights go, it could have been a little bit worse, so still able to get a couple points in the chase. And again, not the night he wanted. He obviously wants to be in the top 12 early on, but his chase shot is not ruined, is what I'm trying to get around with a lot of words and very little meaning here, I guess is the best way to say it.
Yeah, it's an interesting way that the playoff picture has kind of developed tonight, because it seems like with all of the drivers having issues the way that they've had them, save for the front runners who were already pretty far up the points order anyhow, honestly, as they run right now, and this isn't official word or anything, I don't have a calculator on hand, but I don't think the points picture is changing a whole lot as they run. I mean, the drivers that were further back have pretty much all had issues, and the drivers that were up front are pretty much running up front. So I don't think there's going to be too much changing of hands when it comes to points.
I agree. I mean, unless it's somebody like, I think Cody Bird is pretty much the only person, and even he's 11th on track. All the other competitors that are still running in the chase or make up 1st through 8th right now. Then you've got a couple wild cards, such as I believe it's going to be Princeton and Medeiros that are running 9th and 10th, able to interject themselves in the top 10. As our broadcaster, producer extraordinaire Carlos throws the magic numbers screen. I wish my name is Mason, because I do not know what the numbers mean here tonight. But these guys are all in the mix, so I think Bird really has the only opportunity to make any big strides. The top 8 right now that are in the playoff, I don't think you're going to be able to make anything happen here unless somebody has a very, very bad mistake up there.
And, you mentioned Cody Bird. I want to talk about that for a minute. That's kind of an interesting talking point. Cody Bird has had a very up and down night. He had a great qualifying effort of P12, which he was pretty excited about. And then a few laps later, well, he was all the way back in 24th. He had a lot of rear end damage. Things seem to be going pretty poorly for the driver, the number 13. Well, now we're 217 laps into this event, and he's back up in 11th. Knocking on the door of the top 10. So he's been to the front, he's been to the back, and all over the place. But overall, it seems to be evening out for a pretty decent night for the driver that 13.
Yeah, these guys are still clicking it off, and I think at this point, well, I think we both agree that there's not going to be a whole lot of big moves in the points as tonight progresses, but we've seen several almost crashes that almost went terribly. So, I mean, I don't know, anything can still happen. You might have the opportunity for somebody's night to still be ruined, but Delaney out front, he's found some speed. He's got about a second over Hixenbaugh. We haven't seen that all night within 200 laps. The first time that somebody besides Hixenbaugh has been out front and charging through the field. Now, I think we're not going to put any more more cars a lap down here as this stage gets ready to wind to a close with about 10 laps left in it, but I'm impressed. The guys that are still out there clicking it off and not having a whole lot of issues at this point in the race.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy how smooth this race has really gone for a lot of drivers. And, you mentioned we had a few close calls, and we did, but so far, nothing really coming out of the close calls, at least for the front runners. Cameron Stone's gotten loose a few times. Jonathan Delaney had a couple scares with lap cars, but overall, everything pretty clean and smooth. And, I think with Jonathan Delaney pulling away, that kind of speaks volumes about how important clean air is. I kept mentioning, the only car we'd seen in clean air at that point when Bryson was leading was Bryson, and we didn't know how important it was going to be. We weren't sure if Jonathan Delaney was going to be able to get out front, and if he was going to be able to hold the lead if he could get out front. But what he's showing us is that once he got out front, he got that clean air. He's not driving out to the commanding lead that Bryson did in the first stage, but he's got a pretty comfortable cushion, and it seems like the virtue of being in the lead is something that is absolutely invaluable.
Yeah, that's the thing as well. I think it puts a little bird in the back of Bryson's ear saying, all right, there's some other people out on track that can run this pace and put a good job, put a few good laps down. So it's very interesting to see as Delaney is, I mean, it's his time to shine out front. Delaney, Delaney, Hicksenbaugh, Stone, Taylor, Steele, your top 5. They are really putting down laps here, and it's interesting to see how things shake up and what might happen throughout the run. Now, Delaney, if he can hit this pit stop perfectly, he should come back out in front, barring any pit road shenanigans, as we only have about 8 laps left in the stage. As Delaney's working on lap traffic once more, that is the number 19 machine.
And it was an odd straightaway. Sorry to cut you off there, but that was an odd straightaway for Bryson. He got loose coming out of turn 4, and his car remained loose pretty much all the way down the straightaway. He was actually a little bit tail happy as he entered turn 1. So it was a really close call. He ended up losing some ground because of it. So that's just another time where we've seen drivers really struggle to keep these cars pointed in the right direction on the straightaway.
That's one of those things as well. Remember later on in the earlier on in the race, I should say, we saw drivers getting loose kind of out of nowhere and giving the wall a little bit of tap. So we may see that as well as the drivers get closer to empty gas tanks and suspension not working like they had really planned with those lighter race cars. So something to keep an eye out. Granted, I guess the good news is they only have 5 or 6 laps left to go until the stage draws down to an end. And then we'll get them filled back up with 4 fresh tires. But I don't know. I mean, Sean O'Brien has the opportunity to get back in the lead lap, but his last time by was at 31.58. Meanwhile, Delaney and Hicksenbaugh are running 31.1s together. And Delaney's still having to cut through more traffic here at Darlington.
And it looks like he's trying to navigate around Randy Drumhiller, who, remember, was involved in a couple incidents already tonight. We didn't really mention it, but Drumhiller, I believe, was at fault for 2 issues so far tonight. He's got to be real careful out there because the rule in this league is at fault for 3 in a race, and that is going to be a suspension. So he's probably driving on eggshells out there trying to make sure that he's not caught up in anything. And, of course, that's not to blame Randy Drumhiller for anything. Darlington is such a tough track, and we've talked about how hard it is to be that lapped car that that people are going around at seemingly Mach 1. Somebody gets up behind you, and 1 second they're 100 feet back, and then you look in your mirror again, and they're right on your bumper. It's tough. So that's not to pin anything on Drumhiller. It's just the rules of the league. If they find you at fault for 3 incidents, then a penalty will be accrued. And unfortunately, he's had a bit of a rough night. So he's done a good job there. I mean, letting Delaney around, letting Bryson around, taking it easy, and really doing what he needs to do.
Guys, it's a high-pressure situation for pretty much everybody. I mean, we've said it, I don't know, 100 times now, but nobody wants to be the guy that accidentally takes out the race leader by maybe getting tired, especially with a tight race car at this point into the race. We're 227 laps into it for these competitors. As Lane crossed the line, it'll be 228, but I mean, this is a high-stress situation, and drivers get tired at this point in the race, and that's where you can see some crashes that really you wouldn't expect early on in a race, but driver attrition can really play a factor here.
It absolutely can. It's one of those things. It's tough to get through this entire event. I mean, mentally, physically, just getting worn out lap after lap after lap. And as I say that, Bryson having some more internet issues. I've been following along from his perspective on my iRacing feed, and man, oh man, he was blinking in and out there. And hopefully that kind of evens out for him there. Last thing we want to see is one of the front runners to have these internet connectivity issues and have to drop back or have anything happen, especially, again, when Bryson has had so many issues with this in the past. You'd hate to see the playoffs begin and immediately be kind of tarnished by that. So we'll see what he can do. But Jonathan Delaney is going to come to the stripe for lap 230. So this is the white flag of the stage, not sponsored by our public strict contender subs on sale.com because that sponsorship unfortunately ended. But our producer is saying that they're on sale. They may not, we may not be sponsored by the website anymore, but they're on sale. So if you'd like a chicken tender sub, make your way on down to Publix. And as we finish that conversation, looks like Jonathan Delaney is going to round 3 and 4 for the final time this stage. He's going to take the green and white checkered, and he is going to get himself a win here in stage 2. And I tell you what, I got to wonder what's going through Bryson's mind, James. Dominating stage 1, just not having the speed in stage 2. That's got to be a lot of calculations going on behind the wheel of that 63 right now.
That's going to be tough to see. I mean, for somebody that's been a dominant car all night long, I mean, it's got to shake him up a little bit. Watching Delaney pretty much lead that one from start to finish, as the caution will come out for the stage, and you're going to see an entire field of about 16 drivers, 15 drivers, 14 drivers. I'm going to get there eventually, ladies and gentlemen. Bear with me. 14 drivers that are still out on track racing, and I believe we're going to move up to 6 cars on the lead lap following this stage, but this is going to be interesting here today.
Absolutely, it's going to be an interesting show, and I've been listening into the driver radio as well, and I think I called, for once in my life, I think I made a correct prediction. I said that I thought Bryson might have burned up his tires running behind the 9 so close and being so aggressive trying to make the overtake, and Bryson just came across the radio and confirmed that. He said, I tried to make a couple passes early on, and I used up my stuff doing it. That's why I couldn't pass John. So that's pretty interesting to hear that he used up his tires so early in that run. I mean, that's a mistake you don't often see out of Bryson, and I got to wonder if now he's going to take that into account and maybe try to course correct and not do that another time.
It's one of the things with these drivers. They're so smart and talented, so he's going to learn from his mistakes and do so rather quickly to get back out there and avoid making the same incidents happen again, as we see most of the field come into pit lane, as I believe a lot of drivers may try and rock around the track here to try and get a lap back. But man, I'm very impressed with Delaney. That last run put on quite a showing, as both of these guys, or all these guys I should say, the top 5 drivers, already on the pit lane to take 4 fresh Goodyears and a tank of gas, as it looks like it's going to be Delaney out again, followed by Hicksenbaugh, then Stone. So nothing's going to change here in the top 5 on pit lane, as we're going to get ready to re-rack them.
And we're going to try to have a word with Jonathan Delaney real quick, if I can drag him in here. Jonathan Delaney, you got a copy?
I do.
John, it was one heck of a stage 2. You got around Bryson. Oh, you got an issue happening in front of you. Sorry there. You good, John?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. Well, you got around Bryson, and then it seemed like that clean air, you were able to keep the lead. How's the car feeling out there?
Car feels good. I made an adjustment there, before that run we had, and I was just too tight off exit of 2. Made an air pressure adjustment on the right rear and helped it a lot. So that was definitely one of the solutions to helping me be in the lead. Like you said, clean air was definitely a factor as well, being able to stay in front of Bryson. But I think if he wasn't having some blinking problems, it might have been a little closer, because he had to abort some of his passes that he was making because of it. So I think it'll be really interesting, this final run here. I think if I can keep the clean air, though, I think we'll be really good.
All right, James, you got anything for John?
John, I mean, we saw Bryson kind of burn up some tires there trying to make a move around you. Are you going to try and keep the number 63 machine behind you as much as you can, or do you think he's going to be a little bit more aggressive this time out?
I think he'll definitely be more aggressive. I gotta, be just as aggressive, if not more, and, trying to keep in the clean air while trying to keep the tires on the car. So it'll definitely be really hard here. I think it'll be really good fight, though.
All right. Well, John, thanks for your time. You're going to be going green pretty quick here, so we'll put you back up in your team chat. Good luck, John.
Thank you.
And that was stage 2 winner, Jonathan Delaney, out of the booth, and lights are going off on the pace car. So really sounds like that clean air is quite key, James. I mean, even John said, got out there, got the clean air. But also just the fact that, he was able to set the pace and be able to run the race the way he wanted to and kind of force Bryson to use up his tires. The question is he going to be able to pull that again? I mean, is Bryson going to make the same mistake of using up his tires early on, and will his internet issues persist to the point where he can't make the overtake attempts he wants to make?
Yeah, I don't know. I think Delaney's going to put down the fastest lap as he can and try to make Bryson work for it once more. I mean, we talked about that he wanted to set the pace and do so quickly, so I think it's at his advantage to make something happen. I don't know if I think one thing's for certain, Delaney's going to do everything he can to hold on to the lead and make Bryson force the issue instead of the other way around. It appears whoever's out front really has a big advantage here, so let's see if it happens well again for Delaney after his dominant performance that last stage.
Absolutely. The pace car is off the track now. It's up to Jonathan Delaney as the control car to go when he wants to go. And there it is right out of the corner. Wheel spin from the driver of the number 9. Can Bryson use that slight mistake to his advantage? It would appear not, as he's going to fall in line behind the driver of the number 9. And that is going to give, at least for now, the clean air advantage to Delaney, as Cameron Stone is going to fall in line in third, where he spent most of the last run. And Kevin Steele gets up ahead of Jason Taylor for fourth. But that's a battle that's not over yet, because Jason Taylor is right on the bumper of Kevin Steele going into 3 and 4, and these two have been very close in pace all night.
Yeah, I'm surprised at how much aggression we're seeing out of some of these drivers early on. It looked like Cameron Stone was making a move, and then Jason Taylor, Sean O'Brien also put on a great show as well. Excuse me, Jason Taylor and Kevin Steele put on a show. So all these guys, looks like they're trying to figure something out early on, as Bryson really trying to put the pressure on to Delaney as well, as your top two drivers already have about 0.7 of a second over Cameron Stone in third. It is 6 drivers on the lead lap, and a long way to go before they are able to take the checkered flag. We've got about 100 laps remaining in tonight's race, 130 laps remaining in tonight's race. So I don't think we're going to see any big moves early on, but look at that. Delaney clicks off the fastest lap of the race with a 28.55. He has found the track conditions that he is most happy with, and he is hammering down right now.
And even though he set the fastest lap of the race, he didn't really extend his lead over Bryson that much. I mean, the 63 is still right there on his bumper, and I think overall this track's just getting faster and faster. The important thing for Bryson is to make his move and strike while the iron's hot, because if he's forced to stay behind the number 9 too long, well, he's going to wind up just like he wound up last time around. Now, I just heard on the driver radio there may have been an issue between the 86 car and Alex Brinson in the 19. Not entirely sure what happened, but those two seem to be conversating in a less than friendly manner. So maybe something between those two. But the battle for the lead continuing, as Bryson is not letting that number 9 drive away.
Yeah, I mean, Delaney's doing everything in his power to set the pace and run out front without having to run a pace faster than he's comfortable. Hixenbaugh hoping to get his internet problems under control. And Cameron Stone, he's still in the mix here. He's only about 0.3 back from Hixenbaugh, so it's going to be interesting to see what Stone has learned. He's been kind of running second or third all night long, and maybe he's going to follow along and see what these fast guys are doing, as Delaney and Hixenbaugh, they've been putting on a spectacular show all night. For the most part, the entire field's been running very close to single file all the way through here, and haven't seen many positions gained or lost. So I don't know what's going to happen, but these top 3 drivers still have potential to shake it up, as Hixenbaugh all over the bumper of Jonathan Delaney. As he looks to the inside of Delaney, is he going to be able to make it stick? No, he has to fall back out. And oh, they are ever so close coming out of turn 4. They are racing hard for that top spot.
They are racing really hard, and Bryson blinked out as soon as he got to the quarter panel of the number 9. So that may have played a factor in him having to back off and regroup there, not really continue with that overtake. But all of this battling is allowing Cameron Stone to kind of stay right there in the mix on their bumpers. The question is, has Cameron Stone found anything for a long run? That's what I'm wondering, because we saw him stick with the leaders for a little while in that last stage, but once the run went on and the tires started to wear, his car really fell off, and he fell back quite a ways from our 2 front runners. So if he wants to have a chance tonight, he's going to have to figure something out as sparks fly in front of Cameron Stone. Bryson blinked out, came back in the wall, and there were sparks everywhere. That caused a bit of a panic reaction from Cameron Stone, who dove down low on corner exit, and that cost him a little bit of time. I got to wonder how much patience these guys are going to have with the blinking issues.
Yeah, we haven't heard many vocal complaints about it, more of friendly heads up, but as the runs progress and the laps click off, I think drivers are going to take it a little bit more seriously, and they're going to try and make something happen, and like you said, lose a little bit of patience for what's going on, because they want to be up there in the mix. Now Cameron Stone, he's now about a half second back from Hixenbaugh after that big checkup where he thought Hixenbaugh may be crashing in front of him. So he's able to, he's going to have to try and capitalize and get back up there. Meanwhile, Hixenbaugh, once again on the rear bumper of Delaney, trying to find a way through here, but Delaney knows, and he saw it the last stage, if he can force Hixenbaugh to use up a little bit of tire, that will allow him to get some distance and maybe just kind of check out uncontested. So it is a game of strategy among our top 2 drivers, Delaney and Hixenbaugh right now, and I don't know, it looks like it could be in Delaney's favor, have been able to set the pace.
Absolutely could be the case, and it's hard to make a call. I mean, when these drivers are so close in pace, and the other thing to consider is we've got a green flag pit stop at some point. I mean, as long as they stay green, which is something that they were kind of deprived of at the end of stage two. Their second green flag stop was pretty much squandered because of the timing that caution came out. They all came down under yellow. They were good to make it to the end. And so that kind of removed an element of strategy for some of these guys. But now if we stay green, they got another shot at it. And drivers like Bryson, who maybe he can't get around John on speed. Maybe his internet issues are too frequent for him to really commit to any overtakes. But he could get around him on pit road. He could get around him on strategy. And if that happens and puts him back in clean air, well, then it doesn't matter how much he's blinking. He's the control car. He's not around anybody else. So that's another thing to keep in mind. I mean, I think really as these guys stay bumper to bumper, the big determining factor will be the green flag pit sequence when we get to it.
That's something interesting as well. Bird, the number 13 driver, he's worked his way up to 10th place as well. I mean, he's still 5 laps down from the leaders, but he is scoring some more points here. Look at this battle for the lead once more. Hicksonbaugh dives to the inside line. Not quite able to make the move on Delaney that he thought he would be able to make stick. But he is working hard and trying to get up there in the mix, but he's got to keep an eye as well. Cameron Stone is watching Delaney and Hicksonbaugh and thinking, all right, one single mistake, and this may be my race to win. So a lot of racing left to happen as Hicksonbaugh is doing everything in his wheelhouse to try and get around Stone, or Delaney, excuse me, as he gets a big run. Can he make it stick, though, Andre?
Yeah, he had to lift. There's just not enough grip on the bottom. You can see every time he gets down there, the rear end of that car immediately starts to swivel out, and he has to lift. It's just not enough grip. I mean, there's just too much marbles, and unfortunately, the high lane right now is king. So making the overtake is really, really difficult to do. And Bryson, he's not just fighting the one-lane racetrack; he's fighting his lag. He's making these overtake attempts with the very unsure knowledge that anytime he gets alongside the number 9, he may blink in or out or cause an issue and not even be aware of it. So a lot of things kind of piling on that are making this a difficult overtake for the 63.
Yeah, this is going to be tough for all of the guys as 63 Hicksonbaugh doing everything in his power to try and get up to Delaney. And again, they have a lot of laps left. I mean, this isn't the last 10, 15 laps. We've got a whole lot of laps left. I'm not going to do that math because it's very late and I'm very tired, but still a lot of laps, 110-ish laps left to go here tonight. So he's pressuring very, very hard. And I think at this point he knows even if he's not able to make a pass early on and he starts to lose Delaney just by a little bit, he's working out different alternative plans to see what he can get away with later in the race if he does have to get in a position where he needs to move Delaney out of the way. As Delaney and Hicksonbaugh both getting dangerously close to that outside wall coming out of turns 4, which we've seen bite several drivers here today and prematurely ruin their night. So I don't know. I think Delaney might be able to get in the groove here now where he's able to extend that gap over Hicksonbaugh as Hicksonbaugh took it several jabs at the number 9 machine and might have burned up some tires once more.
Absolutely. We got a 3-car battle brewing as Cameron Stone gained a lot of ground over the last lap there. He closed into the number 63 pretty close, and as we watch this battle develop, we haven't done one of these tonight. What do you say that we bring the noise?
We're bringing the kazoos back out? I'm confused here.
It's a crank it up.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back for the first chase round of the Darlington 500, as we've seen some great racing between Delaney, Hicksonbaugh, Stone, Taylor, Steele, all in the mix here. As something interesting point, check us out in the chat. We've got a vote. You can participate at home. Who do you think's going to win the opening playoff round? Right now, it's tied between John Delaney and others, so let us know in the comments for those of you that voted other, and let us know who's going to win, because we greatly appreciate all of our fans from across the world tuning in, supporting your favorite producer, your favorite commentators, at your favorite league, the 100% Cup Series, because we could not do it without you guys at home. So please, make sure you like and subscribe to the 3Y TV. It greatly supports both the broadcast team as well as your favorite driver, getting them the TV time they need to represent their sponsors, as we're trying to get 3Y TV over that prestigious 1,000 subscription mark. Now, Andre, as we come back, I got two questions. A, who did you vote for? And B, why?
Well, I put my vote out for Jonathan Delaney. I think right now, having that clean air, that's just an advantage that cannot be overlooked. I mean, we've seen Bryson. He can stick with Jonathan Delaney. He can be right on the bumper. But I think unless he's willing to move him, he can't make that pass. There's not enough grip down low, and Jonathan Delaney's playing such a good defense up top that it's really limiting the options behind the wheel of that number 63.
Yeah, I think you're right. I am going to vote. I don't know who I'm going to vote for. I'm going to say other, and I'm going to tell you why. It's because I don't know what's going to happen here. I don't know what we're going to see later on the runs as Delaney and Hicksonbaugh get a little bit more aggressive and try and make some moves, as Hicksonbaugh is going to try and charge his way past lane no matter what. I'm expecting a dark horse to come into play here, as I believe that was Hicksonbaugh may have touched the outside wall ever so slightly. A little bit of a scrape is probably the best way to describe it. So I'm betting on a dark horse that I don't know who's going to show up here late in the run, but possibly somebody else to win it and maybe upset what's going to happen out there today.
Definitely could be an unexpected winner. I mean, I think a good option there, if you're talking about dark horse winners, that could be Cameron Stone. I mean, if Bryson is willing to move Jonathan Delaney, that puts Cameron Stone in a pretty good spot. I mean, last year this race was decided when the two leaders, Cameron Stone and Jonathan Delaney, wrecked each other going into the corner, and Bryson just kind of drove on by to an easy victory. If something similar happened this year, well, then this time it would be Cameron Stone being the beneficiary there. And the other thing to consider as well, if Bryson got desperate enough towards the end of this race to move Jonathan Delaney, Darlington's not exactly a track where it's easy to give somebody the old dump and run or the bump and run. It's a very narrow track, and the way that the cars seem to spin, it almost always collects the car that gave them the bump in the first place. I mean, we already saw that tonight when the 44 got into the wall and the 86 gave him a shot into the corner. There was nowhere for anybody to go because the track is just that narrow. So not exactly a track you want to give anybody the bump and run, but if these two leaders got a little bit heated, if they got into it, well, Cameron Stone's back there, and he's waiting to strike.
I think Stone, like I said, he's in the best position to capitalize among any funny business between Delaney and Hicksonbaugh, but now Delaney's able to extend that gap to about a half second over Hicksonbaugh. Kind of what we saw in previous stages, as those who leads the race is able to get out front and kind of set the pace, as that's what Delaney's doing now, not having too many worries up front and able just to hot lap. He's about a tenth of a second faster than Hicksonbaugh his last time by, and it looks like he's extending that gap just ever so slightly out here. So unless Hicksonbaugh can either find some pace or win it on pit strategy, he may be in trouble in the closing laps of tonight's race.
That could be the case, and of course we are about halfway through this green flag fuel run. The stage was called at about lap 230. We're on lap 264, and of course we have, give or take 60 or so laps of fuel. So we're getting there, and it's getting to the time where the drivers are going to have to start considering what they want to do. And I tell you what, if I'm Bryson, I think I'm going for the undercut. I think I'm trying to stop a lap or two sooner to maybe get that track position through the pit sequence rather than, just straight up passing him on speed. That's going to put you at a disadvantage later on, but honestly, James, I'm not sure the disadvantage of being on slightly older tires at the end of the run outweighs the advantage you have being in clean air and being the leader, because everything we've seen says that once somebody's the leader, it's really tough to pass them, even if you are faster.
fully agreed with absolutely everything you just said. Delaney's in the best spot of the racetrack right now. He's commanding the pace, leading the charge, and kind of deciding what's going to happen up front. And I also agree Bryson's going to have to try something differently here to try and get that track position at the very end as he blinks out once more. But he's got to come back out on track ahead of Delaney if he wants to try and fend him off. Whoever's been out front has been really setting the pace and forcing the guy behind him to try and take some alternative lines to maybe push a little bit harder than he wants to and try and take over the race lead. So right now, I mean, it looks like it's going to be Delaney's show, but I mean, we've seen it time and time again. Even tonight, anything can happen. One mysterious wall tap coming out of 4 or a lap traffic getting involved with the race leaders can quickly shake things up, as these guys are doing a great job charging along. And I've got to say, one of the cleanest races we've seen all night. I'm sure the commentator's cursor will hit any second now, but we've only had one caution, so these guys are doing a fantastic job and really not having too many big issues out on track here today.
Yeah, it's been a very clean race, and again, I think that's why the green flag stop is going to be so important and why strategy is going to be one of the big deciding factors. It's just because we haven't really had many cautions to shake things up, so it's pretty much all been about your speed on track and your strategy. Well, obviously, strategy was kind of cut into in stage 2 with that unexpected yellow flag, but this time around, I don't think we can really expect that. I think with the field being thinned out a little bit more and everybody being a little bit more separated, my prediction is that it stays green. And again, if that's the case, I think there's a couple drivers out here, including Bryson, that it's in their best interest to take the short stop strategy. But the interesting thing there is that I know Bryson, and I know that it is incredibly rare for him to take the short stop under any circumstance, even when it would be beneficial to him. He does not ever want to be that guy that pits early and gets caught a lap down or caught in a bad track position when that yellow flag flies. So he always tends to take the longer run strategy. I can't tell you how many times I've been up in this booth commentating Bryson, and I say, yep, he's got to take the short stop. That's going to be the move to make. And for better or for worse, he very rarely ever does. So I'm curious to see, does he take that risk of, being put in a bad track position should a yellow flag fly? Because I would say if there was ever a time to take that risk, James, now is that time, because there's only so many cars on the lead lap. If you get caught a little bit further back in the pack, well, you're not going that far back. So maybe now would be the time to try it.
Yeah, six drivers still in the lead lap. Hixenbaugh, he's still maintained right around that half-second mark, a little bit less behind Delaney, but he's also still battling internet connectivity issues as well, so I don't know what I would do. I would imagine he's got to try something different, especially those internet problems. I don't know if he's going to have the pace and do it the old-fashioned way to try and catch up to the rear bumper of the number 9 machine and make something happen, or if he's going to try and win it on pit road. I would imagine he's got to try something different, anything different. Now, that being said, I've got in my mindset that he absolutely wants a race win. I don't know what's in the back of the head of Hixenbaugh. I mean, as we enter the Chase Championship, being able to finish in the podium, really in the top 5 out of all these drivers chasing those 12 spots is a pretty good day, all things considered, and gets you a big step closer to an overall championship. So we may see Hixenbaugh just follow in line here and click off some laps. It's really going to depend on what his team and his crew chief are expecting out of the number 63 machine. If they're fighting hard for a race win, or if they're going to be happy securing a solid position in the Chase playoff. I don't know what's in the head of those guys, and if that battle for the lead is going to be worth it for the number 63 machine.
Yeah, when it comes to the playoffs, Bryson, I can't even say it's a love-hate relationship. I think he just kind of despises the playoff format. I mean, he's told me as such. Last year, he was by and large the favorite to win the championship. I mean, he was coming in with an almost absurd 15 wins throughout the season. And coming into Phoenix, everybody thought, yep, this is Bryson's race to win. It's his home track. He's good here. He's won here before. But one unfortunate incident late into the race took that championship from him, and suddenly those 15 wins didn't quite matter as much. It was Cameron Stone that walked away with the trophy. And so this year, I'm not sure what's going through his mind. I feel like on one hand, he's definitely driving motivated because he wants to get that championship that he feels he was wrongly denied, especially if he's going to retire at the end of this season. If he's not coming back, well, I'm sure, he's going to want to go out on top. That being said, the way that he feels about the playoffs, it almost makes me wonder if he cares more about just winning the individual races. In a way, maybe the championship would just be a nice bonus to him, but week in and week out, the actual races and the wins in these weekends is what matters to him.
Yeah, and I think as well, I mean, both these guys have been up front all season long. Hixenbaugh, he's got about a 19% win average. Delaney, he has won 29% of his races throughout the regular series, and we're getting a little bit of pit lane updates as well that Hixenbaugh may be expecting to run it dry and finish on one stop to make a run at Delaney, but Delaney is also saying that his car is feeling a little bit loose off the exit, and he might make some adjustments on the final stop as well to try and tighten the car up. So it's going to be interesting to see what these drivers end up actually doing, because they're playing off both their own car as well as what their opponents are doing to try and squeeze out just a little bit more speed, as it looks like Hixenbaugh may have just ever so slightly tapped the wall once more with the back of the number 63 machine. And he's maintaining pace now. We didn't see this earlier on in the last stage where Delaney was able to kind of check out from Hixenbaugh. Hixenbaugh's kept Delaney in his sights with about 0.3 of a gap separation between the two drivers, and I don't know, he seems glued to the back of Delaney as this run progresses.
It could be that he learned from his mistakes and he didn't burn up his tires this time. I mean, Bryson is a driver who doesn't tend to make the same mistakes twice. If he does something and it doesn't work, then he learns from it. And I think this run, he probably had a lot greater focus on keeping the tires on the car, making sure that he wasn't putting himself at a disadvantage on the long run. And he was probably accounting for the fact that this would stay green, because most of the race has. So as long as he can stay right there on the bumper of the number 9, then really what's going to decide that track position is the green flag stops, and whether or not these drivers can jump each other into pit road, who can get the better stop, the better pit road exit, who can stop a little bit earlier, get that extra time from being on fresh tires. It's going to be a thinking game. I think it's going to be less about just raw driving on the track and more figuring out what strategy can get you out front so you can get that ever-important clean air.
Yeah, Delaney, I mean, he's getting a lot of the number 63 machine in his rearview mirrors. Now it is down to consistently about 0.2 of a second separating our lead drivers, and the Hixenbaugh looks like he gets a bit of a run coming out of turn 4, but not quite able to do anything with it going into turn 1. Now Hixenbaugh also does have the advantage as well. Lap traffic is going to come into play, so he may be able to set up a pass, as Delaney is going to have to work around traffic to see if they can cut through nice and easy. As no lap traffic, number 19 machine, I believe that is, possibly the 49 machine of Kevin Blackwell, drops down the inside line, allowing Delaney and Hixenbaugh through without any problems. But it looks to me like Hixenbaugh is getting closer and closer to measure a run against Delaney, as he gets right on the bumper going through the start-finish line, and it looks like he's starting to measure up the number 9 to see where he can make a possible pass here.
As they've always said, getting to the leader is one thing, passing him is another, and we've seen how difficult passing is tonight, but honestly, one thing we have not seen, James, is we've not seen Bryson make an overtake attempt on old tires, and that's something that could be different from what we've seen, because, when they're attacking each other and trying to overtake one another on fresh tires, his car is handling a certain way. There's a certain level of grip that they have and maneuverability, and that applies to the leader as well. The leader has a certain level of grip that he can use to try and defend from those attacks. Now, when they're on worn tires, suddenly these cars are handling like tanks. Well, not actually, tanks are zero turn and they handle pretty well. They handle like a pregnant dump truck on ice once these tires are shot. So what that means is it gets harder for John to defend. He can't move up and down the track. He can't put his car anywhere he wants to block the potential runs of Bryson. So if Bryson were to put himself in the right place and get the nose just up against the quarter panel, and he didn't have any internet issues, if his internet holds out, then I think the defense game gets harder as these tires wear. So John might have a handful here in a minute.
Yeah, it's a whole lot of variables. I mean, the biggest one I think is going to be Hixenbaugh's internet. Can the Comcast gods hold out through the remainder of the race and allow us to see some good flag racing? But look at that, Delaney gets a bit of a wiggle out of the number 9. We've seen that happen a bunch of different drivers coming out of turns 4 later on in the run. The suspension gets light and the back end gets unhappy and sends a little bit of a wiggle. And that is a good thing for Hixenbaugh. He is seeing just a little bit of a crack in the armor from the number 9 machine as he once more looks to the inside line, going into turns 3 and 4, thinks better of it, but that's got to be just the slightest boost of confidence that Hixenbaugh may need late in this run. Just seeing just that little tiny error of Delaney lets him know that, all right, Delaney's not running an absolutely flawless race. He's human as well, so I may have an opportunity to try and capitalize if I just stay close and strike where I need to. Delaney's last time by a 31.13, Hixenbaugh with a 31.22. So these guys running very, very close on lap times as they will pretty rapidly be approaching Sean O'Brien, number 65, who's actually going to come into pit lane. So that is going to leave, once again, 4 drivers in the lead lap as O'Brien goes for a bit of an undercut about 3 to 4 laps earlier than expected. So it's going to be interesting to see how that affects him, and it'll be interesting to see if Hixenbaugh or Delaney see what happens to O'Brien and maybe plan their strategy from there as well.
Well, and I'm not too sure that O'Brien's going to be free of a penalty there. He did hit the commitment cone, and I'm not entirely sure how iRacing handles the commitment cone penalty. I'm not sure if it's true to life, but I know if that was real life, the 65 would be being looked at right now because he did give that cone a good whack as he entered pit road. So we'll keep an eye on him and see what happens. He's having a pretty good run as he goes into the pits. He was sitting P6, 1 lap ahead of the next car behind, which is Brandon Pierce.
Now,
So,
Andre, he is going to have a penalty. He's been in his box for almost 30 seconds so far. And look at this. Hixenbaugh dives to the inside of Jonathan Delaney, using lap traffic to his advantage. All of a sudden, we've got a race for the lead as they come out of turns 4. Hixenbaugh slides up in front of Delaney and makes it clean, but is Delaney going to answer going into turn 1 because he wants to be back out front? But Hixenbaugh, for the first time in over 100 laps, is going to be your race leader here at Darlington. And things are still shaking up with a whole lot of action. Very impressed with these drivers as Delaney looks to the inside.
there he goes back to the bottom. He gave him a shot to the rear bumper and then moved down low. Going into turns 3 and 4, they're going to be door to door. The 63 has that preferred line up top, and he's going to carry the momentum out into the straightaway. And it looks like Jonathan's going to have to fall back into second. Well, I thought strategy was going to be the only way for Bryson to get around John. But, man, he used that lap car almost perfectly as a pick. He was able to get to the inside. He made the pass, slid up with just enough room, and that put him back out in clean air. But he is not driving away with it yet. I mean, Jonathan Delaney is staying on his bumper, trying to compete with it. But now this flip-flops the whole situation. Now it's Jonathan Delaney that maybe has to start thinking about relying on strategy. Because if that clean air really gets that 63 out to much of a lead, there's not much John's going to be able to do.
He's got to keep Hixenbaugh right within striking distance the whole time and keep the pressure on Bryson as well. Bryson's been kind of the clean air aficionado all night long, as it looks like he's extending the gap to about 0.3 of a second going into turns 3 and 4. Now Delaney's got to keep him within about that 0.3 of a second, 0.4 of a second at maximum to try and capitalize on any mistakes that Hixenbaugh may make. As, oh man, this is shaking up all of a sudden here at the end of the race, or close to the end of the race.
Yeah, Bryson definitely came out of nowhere. I don't think any of us expected him to make that move when he did, but that lap car came along, and that's the thing about Bryson. He never quits paying attention. He never quits looking for any and all opportunities to make something happen, and he saw that one lone lapped car coming along, and he knew that it was going to hold up the number 9 in a certain way. So he was able to absolutely jump on that opportunity and make the most of it. Now that he's out in clean air, he is absolutely pulling away. And I don't think that's much to the surprise of anybody. I mean, we've seen the speed out of that 63, and it was only when he was put back in dirty air that he lost that speed and seemed to be, kind of hindered a little bit. Now he's got that advantage again. He's out front, and he is starting to pull away little by little. The thing is, he's not going to be able to pull away too long before this pit sequence because we are getting really close. If they want to one-stop this race, that's going to mean that they're going to pit somewhere around lap 303 or 304, and we're on lap 294. So we're only going to be on track for a few more laps before these guys make their way down pit road. And again, that presents an opportunity for John to try something in terms of strategy.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to really shake things up. Delaney staying within half a second of Hixenbaugh. Hixenbaugh's able to navigate traffic very, very cleanly and not have any issues. That's Delaney has a bit of a moment through turns 3 and 4, and he's all sorts of out of shape coming down the start-finish line.
And that's exactly what Bryson wants to see in his mirror. He wants to see that number 9 overdriving and making mistakes trying to just keep up with him. If he can continue to run the laps that he's running and force Jonathan Delaney to overdrive that car, that's only going to make things better for the driver of that 63. And as he has a pretty sizable gap now due to that mistake, it gives him some breathing room. As Johnny gets into the wall again, he's going to pancake the outside wall, get another Darlington stripe. He comes across the radio, and he apologizes to the driver behind him, Josh Ward, in that 67, several laps down. But John definitely seems to be overdriving right now.
He's looking for any sort of any type of speed he can possibly find to get his way back up to the front. That's got to be frustrating. Almost 300 laps into the race, and now you start making mistakes where it can cost you the most, because that has allowed Hixenbaugh to get about 1.15 seconds ahead of Jonathan Delaney. And as we've seen all night long, that is where Hixenbaugh has been the happiest. And I mean, he's still extending the gap. Now it's 1.4 seconds, so Hixenbaugh with some clean air. And then Delaney possibly with a little bit of aero damage on the back right of that number 9 racing machine. That could not be a good sign for Delaney, as he's got a lot of ground to make up here.
A lot of ground to make up, and like you said, a little bit of damage there. That's definitely going to hold him back. I mean, he got into that wall pretty good. I mean, the first impact wasn't that bad. He scraped the outside wall, picked himself up a Darlington stripe. That second impact was a little bit tougher, and it was in the right rear quarter panel as well, which is not an area of the car that you really want to damage. I mean, you don't want to damage any area of the car, but, you know, getting the spoiler damaged in any capacity here at Darlington can be quite disastrous, and that seems to be what happened to the driver of the number 9. And I think right now, as they run the way things are, it's pretty much all she wrote for Bryson Hixenbaugh. I mean, he's just got to hit his marks, keep turning his laps, make sure he doesn't mess up his pit stall or his pit stop, and if he can do that, then he's pretty much got this thing in the bag. Now, I don't want to commentators curse anybody, so we're going to knock on wood. I'm just pointing out what I've seen out of the driver of that 63, because we know how dominant he has been, and we know that, you know, Jonathan Delaney, he's fast as well, but big blink out from the driver of the 63, and that's something to consider too. That is probably Jonathan Delaney's saving grace there, is any potential internet issues from the 63 if it were to flare up and get worse. But I don't think you can rely on that. I don't think you can really hope for that. So right now, he's got to hit his own marks, try to figure something out on strategy, and get to the end of this. But on your screen there, that was third place, Cameron Stone. He's currently about 10 seconds back, and he is 5 seconds ahead of his current Apex teammate, Kevin Steele, who is the last car on the lead lap, 15 seconds back. And then looking back from there, you've got Jason S. Taylor, who is the only car 1 lap down. He's in the 37 car. Behind him, you got Brandon Pierce. He's the only car 2 laps down. Then you got a handful of cars 3 laps down. So lots of separation throughout this field.
Now, Andre, look at this. Delaney comes in for a bit of an undercut. He's going to be the first driver of the lead pack to come down pit road for possibly the final pit stop of the night if he's able to stretch it out. Now, that's going to be very close to the end, but we talked about it earlier. Who's going to try something different, maybe throw something at the wall, as Hixenbaugh also comes in a pit lane. So is this going to pan out for Delaney, as everybody's coming in pit lane? Delaney started the cycle, then Hixenbaugh, then Stone. How is this going to play into the end of the race? Is they're going to have to stretch it out for about 66 more laps all the way to the very end to try and make it on this final pit stop? Do you think they can make it, or what are you thinking now, Andre?
Well, I think they can definitely make it. I'm not sure these guys would come down pit road if they weren't pretty confident in that. It's going to be close, but I think as long as they manage their fuel and everything fairly well, they should be all right. Now, Jonathan Delaney's got a real chance here. I mean, he came in 1 lap before Bryson, and we do know that 1 lap on fresh tires versus old tires is about 2 seconds faster, which is exactly how far back he was. So if he gets a perfect out lap, he may have something. I mean, he may be able to cycle out ahead of Bryson, but it's going to be tough, and it's going to be close, as Bryson is already making his way out of pit road, and Jonathan Delaney is going to get out ahead of Bryson Hixenbaugh, and actually not by a small margin there, James. I mean, look at that scoring and timing. That's a second gap he just picked up.
I mean, almost about 2 seconds as he gets up to speed, so that is going to be in a great position. Now, we've seen Hixenbaugh able to muscle his way up to the front, and Delaney not able to carry that speed after burning up some tires after Hixenbaugh really put the pressure onto him. Jason Taylor still out front as well, who's going to have to come in about the next 15, 16 laps. So switching up his strategy a little bit to see if he can make something happen. But this is going to be quite the race as now Delaney, he's about 1.6 seconds ahead of Hicksonball. Technically, this is the battle for second right now, but we do know that Taylor has not been running the same pace as our race leaders, and we'll have to come in once more. So this is shaking things up. I mean, this late in the race, we've got about 63 laps remaining, and I still don't know who's going to win this thing.
Yeah, not very often do you see a race where there's only 3 cars on the lead lap that is this close in terms of competition for the lead. It's been really anybody's game in terms of our front-running top 3 tonight, and they've really traded it off back and forth. I'm surprised by how much Jonathan got with that undercut. I mean, I don't know if Bryson maybe had a bit of a slower pit road entry. I don't know if he had a slower exit. Who knows? But he Jonathan made up more than that 2 seconds that I was, kind of predicting just based off the tire fallout. So very interesting there. And again, that gives him the advantage of clean air, which is not good for Bryson. That 63 is strong when it's out front, but it is not very good when it's behind. So it really is anybody's game. I'm curious to see another thing to keep in mind. Jonathan Delaney having pitted 1 lap earlier, that puts him in a slightly more precarious fuel situation. And I have to imagine that even for drivers like Bryson Hicksonbaugh or Cameron Stone, who pitted a lap later, they're also in a precarious situation. I mean, they got to go 65, 66 laps on a tank of gas. And again, the number that I remember being told to me was about 63 laps. So they're going to have to do a little conserving, and John even more so.
I mean, on pit lane, it was kind of interesting. Delaney was through the cones in 51.7 seconds. Hicksonball was through the cones, start to finish at 52.6 seconds. And Delaney was only about 2/10 faster in his actual pit stall, but already Hicksonball has caught up to the number 9 machine, and he's going to start pressuring for the win. Now, I'm curious to see, is Delaney doing a little bit of fuel saving up here, or is that just the pace that Hicksonball is able to make after those final adjustments? Because Hicksonball all over the rear bumper of Delaney going into turn 1 has the blink and checks out of it. But, oh my, we have a race developing already as lap traffic comes into play. The number 13 machine almost gets hit out of the way. Oh, these race leaders are going to come flying through, and they are not stopping for anything out there.
I think the driver, the number 13, may have been a bit distracted eating a York peppermint patty in that machine. Those leaders came up on him pretty quick, and that was enough to just barely hold up the number 9, and that was enough for Bryson to get around him for second place now. Although that is the pass for second, it is essentially the pass for the lead. As you mentioned there, James, Jason Taylor still needs to pit, and he has not been running the same pace as the leaders, so he is essentially going to have to give up that lead. But even if he didn't have to pit, Hicksonball and Delaney are right there. I mean, you can see they are now in the same frame. The leader crosses the line. There goes Bryson and Delaney. But yeah, that was quite an interesting turn of events. And one thing to keep in mind, James, that number 13 that helped Bryson get the lead, that's his teammate. And it looks like we had a little bit of contact there, James. Maybe Jonathan Delaney not too happy with his lap traffic.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that was Delaney we heard over the chatter over through our link into the crew chief, or if that was the other guys. As I think somebody was expected to hold their line that maybe swerved out as well to try and break the draft and maybe make a move forward. Now, Delaney and Hicksonball, as much as they want to get through lap traffic, it's always a gentleman's rule to yield the preferred racing line to the leaders. However, with a big old asterisk on that, if you're battling for your own position and your own personal best, the race leaders are kind of at your mercy as you have a race going on as well. So while these guys are trying to yield the line whenever possible, if they're in a battle for themselves or one of our chase drivers, again, it's only 5 drivers on the lead lap. So there is chase drivers in the top 10 that are a lap or several laps down here right now. They are battling for their own position as well, and the leaders are just going to have to try and make do wherever they can.
Absolutely. I mean, we're in the playoffs now, and at this point, every point counts for a lot of these drivers. And so you're going to have drivers that may be a few laps down. Maybe they're not competing for the lead, but they are competing for points. And at that point, it's their responsibility to their team and their sponsors to bring home every single point they can get. They owe the leaders nothing. right? You don't, as a lapper, is it courteous to let the leaders go? Sure. Is it good race etiquette? Sure. Do you owe that to them? No, not really. So, it's only going to get tougher as the playoffs progress and as points become more and more valuable. And yeah, you're going to see these drivers who they could let the leaders go, but they're running their own race. They brought a car. They have a team that they have obligations to. And at the end of the day, they are well within their rights to run their race.
Race, and they're going to do whatever they can to score the most points for both themselves and their team. So, I mean, especially when you're battling for your own personal best, and especially in one of these chase championships, there's not a lot you can do to try and make everybody happy. I mean, you're out there and you're battling hard for position as much as the race leaders would like for you to make way as quickly as possible. That you've got your own race going on, you've got your own season to worry about. Now, that has allowed Hixenbaugh to extend that gap to about 1.5 seconds over Jonathan Delaney. It's going to be interesting to see if Delaney's going to be able to find any sort of luck here in the closing laps to catch back up, or if he's going to be stuck battling lap traffic as well, as Hixenbaugh has a few more blinks around the track here at Darlington. I don't know what we're going to see. There's still potential for lap traffic to come into play and possibly ruin the night, but it looks like Delaney is starting to fall off the pace here, the number 9 machine, and not gain the strides that he's really looking for late in the run.
Yeah, I think falling off the pace is right. I think Jonathan is, again, he's kind of overdriving the car just like he was in that last stage. It's one of those things where you get frustrated, the lap traffic gets in your way, and then you see the guy that you think maybe you're capable of beating, and he's just driving off into the sunset. And so you start pushing your car a little bit harder. You start ignoring your braking marks or your braking points, and you start driving it in a couple feet deeper. You get on the throttle a couple feet sooner. But that all adds up, and eventually you cross that line, you push the car a little bit too far, and now you're driving in a way that's not very, very efficient. You're making little mistakes, you're losing time, and I think that's what's happening to Delaney here. He's just really trying to squeeze everything he can out of the car, but we've got this package here at Darlington that's, low downforce, high horsepower. This is not your average package that you would see at a track like this normally. So the car is very, very susceptible to being overdriven. And that's another thing to keep in mind, is that at a lot of these tracks, if you go to Atlanta and you've got the high downforce, low horsepower package, you really can't overdrive that car. It's almost impossible to overdrive it. But you come here with this package, and it's almost impossible not to overdrive it every now and again.
Yeah, I mean, I think they hit the nail on the head. This is definitely a driver's track. As Hixenbaugh, oh man, his internet connection's starting to worry everybody out here today. If he loses connection at this point in the race, it'll be absolute heartbreak for the number 63 as well as his team. But I mean, you're right. It's a track that rewards patience and good driving. It's the loose nut behind the wheel that really makes it or break it at tracks such as like your Darlington, where if you overdrive, like maybe at Delaney we've seen with him, you can burn up just a little bit of tires and really kind of shoot yourself in the foot. This is one of those tracks where you have to be consistent all the way through the run and not try and push and force the car to do anything it's not wanting to do. As Hixenbaugh has about a straightaway advantage over Delaney, but he does have a couple of drivers that try and cut through. He's about to lap Kevin Steele's number 24 machine, where we will be down to only 4 drivers on the lead lap. And right as we say that, Hixenbaugh another big blink, and oh, that's got to be nerve-wracking for everybody.
Nerve-wracking for the drivers around him, and nerve-wracking for Bryson himself. I mean, he's leading this race. He's pretty much got it in the bag. The driver behind him is, continually getting into the wall, making little mistakes. He's probably not too concerned with the competition from behind. Most of the field is a lap down, so even if a caution came out, the furthest back on the grid he could possibly fall would be back to 5th. So overall, he's having one of the best nights he's had in a really long time, and if that internet issue started to accentuate itself and started to become worse and worse as the night goes on, or it becomes bad enough that he lags out of the session, well, the driver that hurts the most is the driver of the 63. So Bryson is probably white-knuckling that steering wheel, hoping that his internet connection just holds on.
It's got to be really stressful for Bryson, as now he's made his way around Kevin Steele, the number 24 machine. He has lapped his way through all but 4 cars on the track, as it is Hixenbaugh, Delaney, Taylor, Stone, your top 4 that are on the lead lap. It is Chevrolet going 1, 2, and 3 with Stone representing the lone Ford up here in the mix. Absolutely surrounded by Chevrolets as you have to go from 4th place, Cameron Stone, all the way back to Lucas Hoytsma, who is on the track in 20th. No, I take that back. It's Damaris Hickenbottom. Again, off the track. Damaris parked it on lap about 138, so he's going to finish in 17th tonight before we get to another Ford, but a whole lot of Chevrolets and no Toyotas unless you go all the way back to 23rd and 24th. So the Chevy guys, no matter how this shakes up tonight, have got to be happy with how tonight's going to go. And it looks like it's Hicksonbaugh's chance to really put down some laps. And unless he has internet problems, he should be victorious here. But we've seen things happen plenty of times tonight. Drivers getting loose out of turn 4 and mistakes happen. So I'm curious to see what exactly is going to happen from our 2 drivers out front.
It's going to be interesting, and I'm going to make a request to our producer that we have the graphic that's when the drivers last pit, because we got some information about the fuel range, and that is the number 24 car on that last pit sequence. 66 laps on a tank of gas, and he was sputtering as he pulled into his pit stall. So he was out of gas. That 66 laps, with the amount that he had saved and the way he had driven, was absolutely it. That was as far as he could go. Some of these drivers are awfully close to having to go that entire 66 lap range. So I gotta wonder, there's the graphic right there. You can see Hicksonbaugh last pitted, I believe, 24 laps ago. Delaney 25 laps ago. And we've got a fair amount of laps remaining. We've got 42 laps remaining, 41 now as they cross the line. They're on the edge, James. They are very, very close on fuel. And I got to wonder if Delaney's falling back not because he's lost the pace, but because he's trying to make sure he can make it to the end.
I agree. I mean, Delaney, if he runs wide open for 66 laps, he will be 1 lap short. Hicksonbaugh will be right at the ragged edge. And I kind of wonder if that's what we saw Delaney do early on in the run, because he had a very comfortable lead over Hicksonbaugh, and then Hicksonbaugh rapidly caught up. So I'm not sure if that might have been a little bit of fuel saving we saw early on from Delaney. But that's going to be interesting. I mean, it wouldn't be the first race I've called where guys are sputtering across the start and finish line. So that could shake things up. Delaney's probably got to be in the most risky position here, as Hicksonbaugh, Stone, Steele all came in a lap 3:01. Then you go back to Jason Taylor, Brandon Pierce. So mostly Jason Taylor. He's 5th on track and 2 laps down. He came in a lap 3:25, so he can absolutely make it to the end. But I don't know what we're going to see out of our race leaders as we're hitting them with the old 2 + 2 is 4 quick math up here in the booth to see if our drivers are going to be able to make it to the very end.
I think it's going to be close for everybody. And like you said, Bryson is right on that ragged edge. Now, I don't know when the 24 ran out of fuel at that 66 lap mark. I don't know how hard he was pushing the car. I don't know if he was riding around. I don't know if he was pushing the car as hard as Bryson, because you know as well as I do, James, any difference in how hard you're pushing the car, just a few laps of pushing or conserving can make a difference. So it really is going to come down to, was that 66 laps based on him conserving, or was it based on him driving flat out, as we have another big blink from the 63. So, man, some of these drivers probably starting to sweat a little bit as that fuel tank gets lighter and lighter and these laps wind down.
It's interesting. Right now, none of the lap times really reflect anybody slowing down, as our race leaders are still doing about mid-30s. Now, that last time by, Hicksonbaugh clicked off at 31.24. Not sure if that's fuel saving. Not sure if that's blinking and having to come through traffic. It's a tough call to make, as it looks like Delaney, Stone, and Steele are both in those mid to high 30-second lap times. It is only Hicksonbaugh that checked up a fair amount that last time by. So I don't know what we're going to see here, my friend, as the laps are coming to a close. We've got 36 laps remaining as one driver careens off the inside wall in front of Hicksonbaugh. Not sure if that was an incident there or what it may have been, but I think you're right. This is going to be down to the absolute wire on who has enough pace and gas at the end to make something happen.
And we're having a conversation in driver's chat. I can hear Bryson and John. Remember earlier, James, when I mentioned that, sometimes if a driver's blinking and you stand to gain positions from them having to concede due to the internet issues that, sometimes the competition will come across the radio and say, you're blinking all over the place. You need to give up the position. You need to get out of the way. That's what's happening. Jonathan Delaney came across the radio and told Bryson, hey, you're net coding the wall every single corner. I'm seeing plumes of smoke. You're there only half the time. Basically saying that he is lagging and implying that he may be a danger to the cars around him. And Bryson's response to that was, well, why didn't you complain about it when I was passing you? So having a bit of a conversation in driver's chat that's kind of heating things up here, James.
Yeah, that's racers racing. They'll do everything they can within the rule book to try and make something happen. And I've got to agree with Bryson here. I mean, he's 3.4 seconds ahead. It's not like Delaney, Stone, or right on the rear bumper number 63 machine. He's got a comfortable lead right now. So even if he does have internet connection issues, there's really no one around him that can get taken out by it. So I agree. If Hixenbaugh has internet problems, they're running a tight pack, then that's something to keep an eye out of and maybe cycle some guys around if need be. But, I mean, right now he can throw a water bottle out the window and still be all right, as he's kind of out there in no man's land between lap cars.
I agree. Right now, even if he were to blink out for a quarter of a lap, which he really hasn't done yet, his blinks have been fairly short. He's in a position where he's not around anybody. He's not really much of a danger or a threat. So I'm not concerned about it as a commentator. I don't think the admins of the league are very concerned about it. I think the person who's concerned about it is the person currently running second, who would stand to gain a little bit if Bryson had to forfeit anything due to the internet issues. But again, it all goes back to the old, real life NASCAR drivers yelling that there's debris on the track when it's, down in the infield grass and it's a water bottle cap is all it is, but the guys who stand to gain, they're, it's debris. It's all over the place,
Yeah, and it's funny. I've seen the absolute opposite of that in some of my own races where it is an absolute deluge on a race that was declared dry and the race officials refuse to listen, even when we're waving at them aggressively is what we're going to call the hand motions that were given, but refusing to throw a red flag for some of our races when it was an absolute, just downpour. So I guess it goes both ways. Sometimes race control thinks that maybe the racers are being a little bit too much, but over than that, and then I think that the admins are going to be monitoring Bryson Hixenbaugh's situation, but Andre, I think we're both in agreement. He really can't affect anyone's race now except his own, so I think he's going to be okay for a while unless he gets such a bad blink he's completely removed from the racetrack.
Yeah, we got word from race control that they are monitoring the Bryson situation now. I'm not sure what that necessarily means, but of course, whatever the admins deem necessary is what they deem necessary. So we'll see what happens there. And I agree with you, James. I think Bryson is kind of not a threat to anybody at the moment. But if something were to be decided about Bryson's internet connection issues, I could also understand that because we are on an oval circuit and he may be fine now. He might not be around anybody now, but we do get into lap traffic pretty often and we do get around other cars pretty often. So it's not necessarily like road course racing where at any given time you could be 2 miles from the nearest competition. At any given time, at most, he could be like a mile from the nearest competition that's half a lap down. So definitely a lot closer racing, and I could see if something were to be determined, I could see why. But again, I agree with you. I think he's fine for the time being. He's kind of on his own. He's leading the race. He's not really in traffic. But we'll see. We'll see as Jonathan Delaney is running second right now, and he's had a scary moment in front of him. Lap car got a little sideways, also in front of Kevin Steele in that 24 machine. But right now, I think if you're Jonathan Delaney, you just hit your marks and you wait it out. You see how this plays out.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much that anybody can do here, I think, to catch up to Hixenbaugh. If he's going to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory, that's going to be on his own terms out front. Number 63 machine he's got almost a 5-second advantage over second place. And I can't stress how wild this is. 3 drivers on the lead lap at the end of the tail end of a 500-mile race. That is absolutely mind-blowing to show just how fast these top 3 drivers have been. I think given enough laps, I think you may see Hixenbaugh lap all the way up to third place Cameron Stone. Right now, Stone is about 22, 23 seconds back from the race leader. The average lap time has been about 30.8 seconds to 31 seconds for our top three, or at least our top driver, Bryson. So he's still maintaining a great pace, and he's about a half second faster than Delaney was his last time by. So I don't know, man. This is a night to be remembered for everybody. Drivers, broadcasters, and fans tune in tonight as well.
Absolutely, and as we are at 25 to go, I'm noticing the Bryson connection situation seems to have stabled out. I've been riding along with him from my iRacing perspective, and I haven't seen a blink in a couple laps, so maybe things clearing up. Luckily for our race leader, he may avoid... Oh, and as I say that, there's another blink. So,
Andre, the commentator's curse.
Yeah, and those are big blinks there. He just blinked out 3 consecutive times through turn 1. I don't know. It's got to be nerve-wracking for Bryson. And, you know, if you're an admin, I'll just say I don't envy the admins. I feel like there's no right call to make. I feel like if you do something about it, well, he's the leader, and that's not going to be looked upon too fondly. However, I can also see every argument for making a call on this because he is around other cars. He's catching up to lap traffic, and this blinking has gotten worse. It's become more consistent, it would seem. So, man, what a tough call for anybody to make.
Yeah, I gotta say, that's probably one of my favorite parts about being a producer, a broadcaster, and a racer. And you very rarely ever see me running any sort of race control because there's just no good way to go about it, especially when you're surrounded by friends and peers. Nobody wants to be the quote-unquote bad guy or the rule enforcer to try and make a call here. Now, that being said, I think if I was race control, I'd let him keep running as well because he's about, I don't know, maybe a second, 2 seconds behind the next car in front of him. Now, I agree. If he's middle of a pack, doesn't matter if it's lead car drivers or not, and he's got any big issues, then something's got to change. So right now, I would say as he's out there by himself, I believe he's following Cody Strom, I believe is who that's going to be. And the number 59 machine. No, I'm way off. I'm not quite sure who that is, but as he's catching up to lap traffic, he's in a good chance not to make any big changes and maybe risk anything. I think that may be Cody Bird. I'm not sure if anybody else has eyes on that. On who's about to get lapped again.
Yep,
Yeah,
Cody
so
Bird down the inside.
Yeah, Cody Bird, and we saw him involved with an incident early on, doing a very great job, quickly getting out of the way of the race leaders this time by after getting kind of the rear end bumper smushed on that machine earlier. So he's doing a good job, and right as we say that, Higginbotham with another blink, but again, he's got about a second gap to the lap car that just went down. So I don't know what's going to happen. Higginbotham hasn't had any car control problems all night. That's one of the, I think probably one of the saving graces that he's going to have in any possible admin decisions is he has not found himself reappearing inside the race line or doing anything erratic. He's been holding his line, not making any changes. And that's the biggest thing for everybody out on track is always being consistent on where you're going to go. Now, the internet problem definitely throws a wrench in that plans, but even with how it's going, it's been predictable here tonight, which I think is the most important thing for Higginbotham, who's, again, he's got a 6-second lead over Delaney in second and no sign of slowing down here.
I think you're absolutely right. I think him being consistent makes the lag issue a little bit more controllable because the issue with the blinking, and for the viewers at home, the reason why sometimes a driver may be told to park it if their internet is bad enough is because when they disappear, you're never quite sure where they will reappear. They might reappear in an issue that's going to, or in a place that's going to cause an issue, whether it's inside of another car or right in front of another car that has to check up because they're surprised that somebody just appeared in front of them. And it's hard to predict where that car is going to come back. But if a driver is running the same line every single time and they're hitting the same marks every time, such as Bryson has been doing all night long, then when they disappear, it's a lot easier to predict where they're going to come back because they've been running the same lines. You know that if he disappeared here, then roughly he's going to come back here. And it's actually relatively easy to kind of account for that. As a lapped car gets sideways in front of Bryson, that's probably a scary sight. But yeah, I think you're right, James. I think that consistency is absolutely huge for Bryson.
Yeah, 100% agreeing. And he's still extended that gap over Delaney. It's about 6.7 seconds over the second place driver. We've got 17 laps left to go, 16 as he crosses the line. I mean, we're in the home stretch. It looks like Hixenbaugh is going to be able to make it to the end on fuel. We haven't seen his lap times drop more rapidly than we've seen from regular tire wear throughout tonight. So I think he's going to hold it wide all the way to the end and should be able to finish. Now, what I'm wondering, Delaney, who's running about the same lap times as Hixenbaugh, he's the closest driver to the danger zone on fuel. He's second place. He does have about a 17 or 14 second advantage over third place Cameron Stone if he does have to rapidly check up and try some fuel, but I think our top three are looking pretty good to finish where they're at, all things considered.
Absolutely. I think right now that the amount of separation we have, as long as the top three can just hit their marks and keep it consistent, they're pretty much good to finish where they run. I mean, it should be smooth sailing for most of these guys, but this is racing. This is motorsports, and I think we all know that in motorsports, nothing is guaranteed and nothing is a given. So really, even though it looks pretty solid for these guys, anything could happen at any moment. We could even get a late race caution. Who knows? I mean, there's still a lot of cars on the track, a lot of cars that are racing for points. I mean, we could have any number of things happen that would shake up this playoff picture in many ways, but we'll just have to wait and see. For now, they got to hit their marks, and they just got to do their job as a driver and keep clicking off these laps and hope that everything stays pretty stable. In fact, actually, Bryson is getting faster. So he may have been conserving and then realized he saved enough, because last time around it was a 31.0 and the lap before that was actually a 30.9, whereas a few laps ago he was running 31.1s, 31.2. So he picked up a couple tenths there, which you don't often see this late into the run. So he may have been conserving, but it seems like now he's pretty confident.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm 100% agreeing with you. He seems like he's got the pace. He's getting faster as the run progresses, gaining about a tenth and a half on that late run. Not having too many big problems and just kind of in his own world right now. He's got all sorts of clean track around him, not having to pressure too much really anywhere. So good to see him getting faster. That last time by, he's about 2 tenths faster than Jonathan Delaney was. As we just got a word from one of our pit lane reporters as well, Jason Taylor catching Kevin Steele after he went for a two-stop strategy here today. If Damaris, our pit lane reporter, previously one of our favorite racers out on track, did his math right, he should be catching Steele around lap 365. So not a lot of laps left. We've got 11 to go as Hixenbaugh comes around. Not a lot of time for anybody to make any big moves here. I mean, Andre, you think anything's going to get shaken up, or you think you're going to finish right where they're at?
Well, I think the most possible shakeup is like you already mentioned. Jason S. Taylor is catching up to Kevin Steele, and he's going to catch him with just a few laps remaining in the race. So, I mean, we could see fourth place change hands. That is a firm possibility. Right now, I think when it comes to the top three, barring anything chaotic happening, I think these three are pretty much locked into their position. I don't foresee John Delaney making up this gap, and certainly Cameron Stone, who is not far from going a lap down himself, I don't foresee him making up any gap. So again, I think the biggest shakeup could possibly be fourth place changing hands.
Barring any fuel incidents out of our race leaders, which I don't think is going to happen again. As you pointed out, Hixenbaugh got on the gas very hard. A good signal that he's not running low on fuel or attrition. He's still in it to win it. And you kind of get one of the second wins as a racer. With 9 laps left to go, you realize, all right, I can make it on fuel, and I've got a very comfortable 7.7 second gap over second place Delaney. Like, Hixenbaugh's got to be feeling really good right now, and he's kind of getting hyped up in his sim rig, knowing, all right, I have the very good chance here to win the first chase round of the season, and it looks like it's his race to lose now.
Yeah, I mean, getting a win here, it would make things a lot easier. Obviously, he's got a pretty big points cushion from stage wins and other things he's done to accrue points. So he's one of the few drivers that didn't necessarily need a great first round to progress. He had a lot of points to fall back on, but if you get that win and you lock yourself into the next round, well, that can't hurt. It can only make it a little bit easier. It saves your points cushion for later days, and it makes sure that you're going to get into the next round no matter what. So I'm sure he wants to grab this win, and I'm sure this is a track that he wants to win at. I mean, Bryson, he likes Darlington. He's hosted many exhibition races here. He's always said it's a bit of a driver's track. It's a track he loves to come to. It doesn't matter what car, what package. He loves Darlington, and so for him to take the sweep, I mean, get both Darlington wins in a season, that would be huge.
Yeah, it looks like he's doing a great job. We're clicking off some laps. It's going to be 6 to go as he crosses the line, as he's still got about an 8-second advantage over Jonathan Delaney and getting faster and faster. Meanwhile, he's about 26 seconds ahead of Cameron Stone, who's doing his best to hold on to the lead lap with 6 laps left in the night. He's about 5 seconds away from getting overtaken completely. Now, Stone's biggest advantage here is he's only about 1/10 of a second slower than Hixenbaugh that last time by. Meanwhile, Delaney, he clicked off a 31.47 compared to Hixenbaugh's 31.07. So again, Delaney may be in fuel-saving mode here as he came in 1 lap earlier than his competition and friends, Bryson Hixenbaugh and Cameron Stone. So not quite sure if maybe we see Delaney having to fall off the pace due to driver attrition. We've seen him kind of overdrive the car at certain stages in the run, and the tires may just be absolutely shot of the number 9 machine. Or he may be doing everything in his power to try and come in under his own power without having to kick in the clutch and coast to the starting line. So I don't think we're going to see many big shakeups. I mean, Jason Taylor's starting to catch up to Kevin Steele, but still about 8 seconds separates those drivers in 4th and 5th. So I'm not expecting a whole lot of big moves with 4 to go, but I don't know, never say never, as we've seen some crazy things happen here before.
Absolutely, and you know, with Bryson pushing the car the way he has, I mean, he's not necessarily home free on fuel. I mean, he could have confidence that he is, and we could think that he might be, but at the end of the day, you know, these cars don't have fuel gauges. They got fuel pressure gauges, but that doesn't exactly tell you a whole lot about how far you can go. So we really don't know in terms of fuel mileage if any of these guys are absolutely as secure as they might think they are. But right now, it looks like they're all pretty solid. Jason S. Taylor, I don't think is going to get to Kevin Steele. I was following along with the number 37. The gap is still pretty large, and I think Kevin Steele is going to be able to hold on to 4th. I mean, we don't have that many laps really remaining in this event, so we'll keep an eye on that. But right now, everybody just kind of running their lines, trying to turn their laps. I think the 9 car, our producer said the 9 car got into the wall a lap or 2 ago. But other than that, everything's pretty solid.
Yeah, these guys are going to be able to make it all the way to the end. And yeah, we did confirm, Carlos gave us the heads up about the number 9 machine, but Delaney doing a great job, able to stay up there. And I mean, a 2nd place after tonight's run is a great job, but the white flag will fly for Bryson Hixenbaugh as he's going to come around here, Darlington, for the final time with a commanding win and able to hold on and praise the internet gods. He's able to get back here, but man, what a night here tonight, Andre.
Absolutely. All he's got to do is navigate 2 more corners securely as his internet blinks out a little bit. That's probably scary. Imagine the heartbreak if that internet connection issue was enough to boot him out. But it's not, as he gets a little sideways, and he's going to drift it down the straightaway and take his 6th win of the season. And he's going to get the Darlington sweep for the 2021 season.
A great run from all of our competitors. Bryson Hixenbaugh, Jonathan Delaney, Cameron Stone, our top 3 finishers. As that was a great race with just a, correct me if I'm wrong, Andre, but that was 1 caution, correct?
Yeah, only 1 caution for cause. Everything else was stage cautions, things like that. Dan Fields in the chat. Shout out to Dan Fields. He says Bryson's new sponsor, Net Zero. That's kind of funny. I like that. Anyway, we're going to let the rest of these drivers cross the line. We'll get our final running order out to you guys so you guys can know exactly where your favorite drivers finished this event after 500 grueling miles. And once that's said and done, we're going to have some words with our top 3 finishers. And it does, as Bryson is going to burn it down. I'm sure his high side teammate Cody Bird will be here any minute to burn it down with him. But we do have our final running order. I'll go ahead and take 1 through 10, then pass it off to you, James. Bryson Hixenbaugh walks away with the win, defending his Darlington win from earlier in the year. Jonathan Delaney brings it home 2nd, 9 seconds back. And the final car on the lead lap, Cameron Stone, 27 seconds back. He's going to bring it home on the podium in that 57 machine. Kevin Steele, P4. Jason S. Taylor, 5th. Brandon Pierce, 6th. You got Sean O'Brien Jr., 7th. Dustin Hall, 8th. Alex Princeton, 9th. Running out your top 10, Cody Bird.
Then we've got Brandon White finishing 11th here tonight. Randy Drumhiller finishing 12th. Josh Ward 13th in the results. Devin Medeiros finishing 14th. Preston McRae finishing 15th. You've got Kevin Blackwell finishing 16th. Damaris Hickenbottom finishing 17th. Raymond Root finishing 18th. Cody Shaw finishing 19th. And then Lucas Hoitzma finishing 20th here tonight.
And rounding out the rest of your field, you got Jason Chambers in that number 30 machine, bringing home 21st. Ryan Samuelson, 22nd. Mason Lowry, 23rd. Robert Miller, 24th. Dakota Null, P25. And rounding out the field, Tyler Pinsino in that number 2 machine. It's going to bring it home at P26. That is your final running order for the night. We're going to go ahead and try to get our top 3 finishers in for interviews momentarily. It looks like none of them are in the waiting room yet. Oh, we got Jonathan Delaney, so our runner-up. We're going to wait for Cameron Stone, as is per usual. We go from 3rd up to 1st. Let's see if I can get him in the waiting room. All right, we got him in the waiting room. We're going to bring up Cameron Stone. Cameron Stone, you got a copy?
Yes, sir.
Well, you brought it home on the podium. You had a really good run all night long. I mean, very consistent. You were constantly running up front. And overall, it was a good points day. How you feel walking away from it?
It's about where I expected to be. I knew Bryson's just always got a different gear at this track, and I haven't been able to figure it out. I followed him enough, and it just hasn't, I guess, transferred over to me yet. But I figured he was going to be the favorite tonight. Robert's usually really good at this track too, so I was looking at about 3rd or 4th. That's about how good the car felt. Just real happy to make it through this one unscathed. If you guys remember last year, how much of a debacle this race was for me, so didn't have the bad night that we needed to avoid. Ended up on the podium, so that's good. We'll roll this momentum and keep going. Run some short tracks in this round. Real excited for that. So just keep this momentum going, man.
Now, Cameron. Yeah. Oh, sorry, Andre.
Nope. Go ahead, James.
Rock, paper, scissors. I'll go first. All right, Cameron, you were one of the fastest Fords out on track. How did it feel later on the runs as the car started to tighten up? Or we saw a few drivers starting to lose the tail end, come out of 4 and kind of giving that outside wall a tail tap. Was that something you experienced as well in the number 57 machine, or was it smooth sailing all the way through a run for you?
It's definitely not smooth sailing. Early in the run on the cooler tires, it's seemed like everybody was struggling with loose. I was definitely no exception there. And the first stage, I let a lot of people by. That was my cruise and try not to damage the car stage, because track's got a lot less grip than it did in May when we were here, and you definitely notice it on those cold tires. So I did hit the wall a couple times in stage 2, and that kind of made the car 10 tight. I guess we messed up something in the right front, and after that I was dealing with kind of like a push loose thing where it was really tight in the center, and since I had so much wheel in it, it was getting real loose on the exit. I tail whipped it a couple times in stage 3, and I almost lost it off of 4 one time, so it was a handful. But again, just real happy to finish with a mostly clean car.
Absolutely. Well, you mentioned we're going to some short tracks coming up, and I know obviously that's kind of your area of expertise. You're a big short track guy. You love going to those tracks. What's the plan going forward? Going to put in a lot of practice time, or are you feeling pretty confident?
I'm definitely going to put in a lot of practice at Richmond. We've really only got 3 real short tracks on the schedule, and that's the one that I've not had the most success at. They're going to run a lot of laps for Richmond, try to get that dialed in. Bristol, I just hope and I pray that the set from last year works and we can lap the field again, because that definitely takes a lot of the stress out of it.
Absolutely. Well, again, it was a great run. Anybody you'd like to shout out or thank?
Always got to shout out Mom and Dad. Appreciate y'all watching that one. Megan and Conrad should be watching as well. I know probably got a few more people watching this week. Not sure who, so I can't call you out by name. But thank you for checking in and supporting the league and everything. Got to thank you, I guess, because you decided to put the sponsor on the car this week. D&Q Podcast. Y'all check it out if you want to hear 2 people that are not really qualified to talk about anything, talk about lots of things. Got to shout out Nexus Esports for the set this week. It was definitely better than anything I could have done by myself, so appreciate those guys. Shout out to Kevin Steele for coming home 4th place while using a generator to power his rig. So he hasn't had power since Wednesday. Had a lot of flooding this week. So shout out to him for sticking with it there. And and I want to apologize to Jason S. Taylor for wrecking him in 3 and 4. Definitely didn't mean to do that, but glad he was able to save it and come home 5th.
All right. Well, Cam, thanks for your time, and hopefully we're talking to you next week.
Thank you, bud.
All right. That was your 3rd place finisher, Cameron Stone. We're going to bring up our runner-up, Jonathan Delaney. See if we can get him. John Delaney, you got a copy?
Yes, I do.
Well, John, you ran a great race all night long. Might not have been the result you were looking for, but it was a great points night, and you were really consistent. How was the car out there?
Car was good. Early on, the car was trash. It was terrible. The track temp and just the lack of grip on the track, I was just way too tight. And, the car didn't really come in till right there at that caution stage 2. So, yeah, we had a good night. It was really close between me and Bryson. That one run where he got around me, I just got tight off at 2 behind in dirty air behind that one lapped car. I got too tight, had to lift off of it, and he was able to get the run. And then after that, my tires were too hot and they were too worn, so I was unable to stay with him. So.
Now, Jonathan, you talked about how that clean air was so important. It seemed like whenever you or Bryson got that clean air and track position, you were able to put down some really good laps. I mean, how important do you think that that open air on the hood of your car was for those faster runs you were able to have?
I was very, very helpful. Just getting clean air on the nose was so nice. Both turns really. The only bad thing about it was you weren't able to run your pace. That's one thing. Bryson stayed in with half a second the entire run, that second to last run we had there in stage 3. So, I definitely had to, every once in a while, look back in my mirror and, see what he was doing. I was pushing a little too hard off of 4 because he was killing me off of turn 4. He was just able to get such a better run than me. And, I was always looking back, making sure, he didn't have too big of a run. And that's what caused me to burn off my right rear because I was just pushing it too hard off exit. So.
Right. Now, we are going to a short track next week. We're headed to Richmond. How do you feel about some short track racing? You feeling pretty confident going in? I
am pretty confident. I've been really strong on the short tracks this year. We were good here. We were good at Richmond last time. We actually won there. So I'm going to try and do it again. And, I feel like I have pretty good chances going into it. So, but yeah.
Absolutely. Well, John, again, congratulations on a great night. Again, an amazing points night. You got yourself a stage win, got yourself a podium. Can't ask for too much more than that. Anybody you'd like to shout out or thank?
Yep. I'd thank the admins, Kevin Steele and Demar Sickenbottom, for running this league. It's awesome. Thank you guys for broadcasting. Shout out to everyone at Great Lakes Motorsports, Grixis, and ERG for the setup help this week. Shout out to Mom, Dad, brother, Tanya and Bob, and my grandmother. Shout out to all of them watching. And yeah, shout out to Bryson. It was definitely kept it interesting for sure. I had a lot of fun racing him, so yeah.
Interesting indeed. Well, thanks for your time, John, and hopefully we're talking to you next week.
Yep, thank you guys.
Runner-up John Delaney out of the booth, and now we're finally going to have a word with the race winner, Bryson Ixenbaugh. You got a copy?
Yeah, I got you guys.
Well, Bryson, I can't even be too surprised that you just about put the entire field a lap down because it's something you've done before. But it was a dominating night out there, just absolutely putting on a clinic. I got to ask, though, there was a point in that race where John got out in front of you. He got the lead actually a couple times, and it seemed like the car was struggling in dirty air. What was your mindset going through this race, and how much did the dirty air come into effect?
Well, I knew if I just was patient with it, I could get back by him because he fell off. I did later in the run. I think I had a lot of trouble in stage 2, though, when multiple times I'd get the run on him. I'd use up my tires, getting the run out of 2, and then I had to lift. After they said I was blinking, I can't put them in that position. I got to make sure I'm all by myself, got room just in case anything happens. And it really messed me up, and then I spent too long behind John and just killed the right front out of 2. I couldn't turn down the track just as well as I wanted to get there. So I knew that I pretty much lost it for stage 2, and I just had to be more patient for stage 3 and get through them earlier.
Now, Bryson, it seems like the car was handling very well for you throughout the run. Now, if you could go back and do that exact race all over again, is there any setup changes you'd make on the car going into tonight, or were you pretty happy with where things ended up?
I'm really happy with the end result if I'm leading. If I knew I was going to come out behind John again or get past in stage 2 or beginning of stage 3, I probably would loosen it up a little bit just so I knew that I could turn down the track better in 2 behind him, because I got a little bit lucky getting around him. In stage 3, he got held up by a lap car off 2, and he checked up and allowed me to get the run. Hopefully, I think I would have gotten him anyways after the pit stops, since he had this pit before me and needed to save fuel, but it would have been more interesting.
It was definitely an interesting overtake. I mean, just the battle between you guys all night long was really fun to watch. You guys both just trading off the position, trading off the lap times. It was really fun to watch. Now, obviously, this win locks you in to the next round, and you're pretty much set to get into the round of 12. I mean, with the points buffer you had anyhow, you didn't necessarily need to win, but now you're looking even more comfortable. Is this the start of a big push to win this playoff?
Yeah, it's good to get the momentum going again. Hadn't won since June earlier at Nashville, so I had a stretch there where I maybe could have won only one race in the summer. I just was clearly the second or third or fourth best car a lot of weeks. So it's good to come here, be the front runner, lead the most laps, and take the win, and hopefully carry it more for the rest of the season.
Absolutely. Well, again, congratulations on the win. Is there anybody you'd like to shout out or thank?
I'd like to thank Cam and John and everybody in the league for putting up with my internet issues there for the second half of that race. Hopefully I'll see if I can get it fixed this week. I might end up taking off next week and seeing if I can get it fixed over the weekend. But we'll have to see what the problem turns out to be. And also got to shout out my family members watching. I know it's really late for them. This is a pretty long race that starts pretty late at night. But a lot of them try and stay up to watch it. So thanks to them for supporting me and watching the races.
Absolutely. Well, again, congratulations, Bryson, and we're going to let you go celebrate.
Thanks, guys.
And that was race winner Bryce Nixonbaugh out of the booth. Well, James, I guess you got your first taste of, the real Bryson. This is your first broadcast where you've seen what we up in the 3Y TV booth have seen quite a few times, where that 63 car just puts on an absolute clinic. What are some of your post-race thoughts?
That was a race from start to finish, and they did a great job all the way through tonight. As Jason Taylor, he's able to go from last to fifth tonight, so another great driver that really charged hard through the field. So, I mean, well done to him as well as all the other drivers. Very surprising to see that few guys able to finish on the lead lap, but I think with those good green flag cautions, it really allows the top drivers to rise all the way to the top and show what they're made of. So all the way around, I mean, great performance from all the guys, and Hixenbaugh and Delaney put on a fantastic show here tonight. So very impressed with everybody we saw out on track today. So overall, I mean, a great race, especially for Darlington.
Wholeheartedly agree. That's going to do it for our post-race coverage here at Darlington for the 100% Cup Series. I'm Andre Grambush, joined alongside James East, and of course, producer Carlos Acosta, who, again, he's the man that makes it all happen. And without him, these broadcasts wouldn't be a thing. So, again, subscribe to 3Y TV. Get him over the 1,000 mark here on YouTube, and we'll see you next week.